The accident that changed everything wasn't the crash itself, it was the lie she told in the wreckage. Clara Whitmore, Manhattan's most feared corporate executive, made a choice in those first seconds after impact. Keep her eyes closed, pretend, listen. Because for once in her perfectly controlled life, she wanted to see who would stay when the power was gone, when the title meant nothing, when she was just a woman bleeding on broken glass. What she heard would shatter every wall she'd ever built. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this journey travels. The rain had started 3 hours before the crash, turning Madison Avenue into a river of black mirrors. Clara Whitmore watched it from the 42nd floor of Whitmore Industries, her reflection fractured across floor-to-ceiling windows that made lesser executives feel small. She didn't feel small. She never had. Ms. Whitmore, the car's waiting. Daniel Harper stood in her doorway, tablet in hand, his tie slightly loosened after a 14-hour day that had started before sunrise. Traffic's going to be murder with this weather. Clara didn't turn from the window. Murder implies something unexpected, Daniel. Traffic is merely inevitable. She gathered her Burberry coat, the one that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and swept past him with the efficiency that had built her empire. Did you confirm the Singapore call for tomorrow morning? 5 a.m. sharp. I've already adjusted your schedule. Daniel followed her into the private elevator, his footsteps quiet against marble that cost $800 per square foot. And I moved your breakfast meeting with the Brennan Group to 7:30 to give you buffer time. The elevator descended in silence, that particular quality of quiet that exists between people who've worked together long enough to read each other's moods. Clara studied him from the corner of her eye. The slight slump in his shoulders, the way he rubbed his temple when he thought she wasn't looking, the coffee stain on his cuff that he'd tried to hide by rolling up his sleeves. You look tired, she said, her voice softer than her usual boardroom steel. Daniel glanced up, surprised. In 3 years as her executive assistant, Clara Whitmore had commented on his appearance exactly twice, once to tell him his tie was crooked before a crucial presentation, and once to observe that he'd gotten a haircut. Personal observations weren't her style. I'm fine, he said automatically, the response of someone who'd learned that fine was the only acceptable answer in corporate America. Liar. Clara's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. But I appreciate the professionalism. The elevator opened onto the underground garage, where Marcus, her driver of 15 years, waited beside the black Mercedes sedan. He held an umbrella that she waved off impatiently. 20 feet to the car, she could handle a little rain. Daniel slid into the passenger seat while Clara settled into the back, already pulling out her phone to review the quarterly reports that would dominate tomorrow's board meeting. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't have agendas. Numbers were pure truth, and Clara had built her life on their absolute certainty. Where to, Ms. Whitmore? Marcus asked, though he already knew. Same route, every night. Her penthouse on the Upper East Side, the one with the view of Central Park that she barely noticed anymore. Home, she said, without looking up from her screen. The car pulled into traffic, joining the slow crawl of headlights and brake lights that defined Manhattan after dark. Rain hammered the roof, turning the world outside into an impressionist painting of blurred neon and shadow. Did Emma do okay at her presentation today? Clara asked suddenly, her eyes still on her phone. Daniel's head turned so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. Excuse me? Your daughter, the solar system project. You mentioned she'd been working on Saturn's rings all week. Clara finally looked up, meeting his stunned gaze in the rearview mirror. I assume it went well, given that you're not having a crisis. For a moment, Daniel couldn't find words. Clara Whitmore remembered his daughter's science project. Clara Whitmore, who forgot the names of vice presidents she'd worked with for years, who once asked her own sister's birthday 3 times in a single phone call, remembered that Emma had been nervous about presenting her model of Saturn. She got an A, Daniel managed. She was so excited she made me call my mom to tell her before we even left the school parking lot. Good. Clara returned to her reports. Intelligence should be rewarded. Daniel turned back around slowly, his mind churning. 3 years. 3 years of coffee orders and calendar management, of late nights and working weekends, of watching Clara Whitmore dismantle competitors and build empires. He'd seen her fire a COO in under 3 minutes. He'd watched her negotiate a $40 million deal while simultaneously eating lunch and approving marketing materials. He'd learned to read her moods from the set of her shoulders, to know when she needed coffee and when she needed silence, to anticipate problems before they became crises. But he'd never quite figured out who she was when the armor came off. If the armor ever came off. "The Dennison merger closes Monday," Clara said, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "I'll need you to coordinate with legal on the final documentation, and someone needs to handle Richards when he inevitably has a meltdown about the restructuring." "Already scheduled a call with him for Monday morning," Daniel replied, slipping back into the familiar rhythm of their working relationship. "I also took the liberty of preparing talking points about the retention packages. That should calm him down. You're worth every penny I pay you." "You don't pay me nearly enough," Clara laughed, actually laughed, a sound so rare that Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror to make sure he'd heard correctly. "Probably true. Remind me to authorize a raise after the merger celebration." "I've been reminding you for 6 months." "Then remind me harder." The traffic light ahead turned yellow. Marcus, cautious as always, began to slow down. But the delivery truck behind them didn't. Its brakes, worn down after too many miles and too little maintenance, failed to grip the rain-slicked pavement. The driver's eyes went wide as he pumped the pedal uselessly, watching the Mercedes get closer, closer, too close. The impact sounded like the end of the world. Metal screamed against metal as the truck's front end crumpled into the sedan's rear quarter panel, sending the car spinning across the wet intersection. Clara's phone flew from her hands, her seatbelt locking tight across her chest as the world became a carnival ride of shattered glass and screaming tires. She saw the traffic light spin past once, twice, 3 times, saw Daniel's hands brace against the dashboard, saw Marcus fighting the wheel as another car, a taxi that couldn't stop in time, clipped their front bumper and sent them into a complete rotation. Time didn't slow down the way it did in movies. If anything, it sped up, condensing an eternity of physics and chaos into 3 seconds that felt like falling off a cliff in the dark. The Mercedes came to rest against a fire hydrant, its front end crumpled, its windows spiderwebbed with cracks, its interior filled with the chemical smell of deployed airbags and the terrible silence that follows violence. Clara's head throbbed. Her ribs screamed where the seatbelt had caught her. Something wet and warm trickled down her temple. Blood, probably, though she couldn't quite make herself care. She could hear shouting outside, the hiss of the fractured radiator, the distant wail of sirens that meant someone had already called 911. She could also hear Daniel moving in the front seat, his breathing ragged and pained. And in that moment, with her head spinning and her perfect control shattered like the windshield, Clara Whitmore made a decision that would change everything. She kept her eyes closed. It wasn't unconsciousness. Her mind was perfectly clear, sharp even, adrenaline burning through her veins like fire. It was a choice, a test, a question she'd never had the courage to ask before. Who stays when the power is gone? Who cares about Clara, not the corner office, not the stock options, not the woman who signs the paychecks? "Miss Whitmore?" Daniel's voice was rough, frightened. "Marcus, can you hear me?" She heard him unbuckle, heard him push against the deployed airbag, heard him groan as he moved. Broken ribs, maybe, or at least bruised. The passenger door shrieked as he forced it open against the damage. "Someone call an ambulance!" Daniel's voice louder now, projecting toward the crowd that was gathering. "We need help here." "Already on the way." A stranger's voice, male, trying to be helpful. "Don't move her. You could make it worse." "I'm a certified first responder," Daniel cut him off, and Clara felt a flash of surprise. She didn't know that. 3 years, and she didn't know that. "I need you to keep everyone back and direct the paramedics here when they arrive." His hands found her throat, fingers pressing gently against her carotid artery, checking her pulse. Professional. Competent. The same hands that organized her calendar and proofed her presentations now working to make sure she was alive. "Pulse is strong," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Breathing steady. No obvious spinal trauma, but I can't rule it out. Come on, Clara, stay with me." Clara. Not Miss Whitmore. Not ma'am. Just her name. raw and real. She felt him move, heard the rustle of fabric as he shrugged off his jacket despite the rain that was still falling. He draped it over her carefully, protecting her from the water streaming through the broken windows. "Marcus?" Daniel called, his voice cracking. "Marcus, can you hear me?" A groan from the front seat. I'm okay. Airbag got me good, but I'm okay. Ms. Whitmore?" "Unconscious but stable," Daniel said. "Don't try to move yet. Let me check you first." Clara kept her breathing even, her face relaxed, playing the part perfectly. Through her closed eyelids, she could see the flash of red and blue lights now, emergency vehicles cutting through the rain-soaked night. She could hear the crowd growing, phones being raised to record the wreckage, voices speculating about who was inside, whether anyone was dead. But Daniel's attention never wavered. "You're going to be okay," he said quietly, his hand finding hers, squeezing gently. His palm was warm despite the rain, calloused in a way that spoke of more than keyboard work. "The paramedics are almost here. You're going to be fine." He said it like a prayer, like a promise, like someone who knew the difference between hope and certainty and chose hope anyway. "I need to tell you something," Daniel continued, his voice dropping lower, intimate in a way that made Claire's chest tighten. "I know you can't hear me, but I need to say it anyway. I need to say it to someone, and you're here." Claire's heartbeat picked up, though she fought to keep her breathing steady. What could Daniel Harper, her perfectly professional assistant, possibly need to confess in the middle of a car wreck? 3 years ago, Daniel began, his thumb moving in absent circles against her hand, "I was someone else. I was a husband. I was a man who came home to dinner on the table and a wife who laughed at my stupid jokes and a baby who was just learning to walk. I was happy in a way I didn't even recognize as happiness because I thought it was just normal, just life." The rain drummed harder against the shattered car. Somewhere in the distance, Claire could hear the paramedics arriving, their voices calling out for information, but Daniel didn't stop talking. "We were on our way to Emma's first birthday party. I was driving. Sarah was in the passenger seat, trying to light the candles on the cake she'd been up all night decorating. We were arguing about whether one candle was enough or if we should do one big candle and a bunch of little ones, because apparently that's the kind of thing you argue about when you're happy and stupid and you think you have all the time in the world." His voice broke. Clara felt his hand tremble against hers. "The truck ran a red light. Sarah never saw it coming. I did. I saw it for maybe half a second, just long enough to think, not today. Please not today." And then everything was metal and glass and screaming. When it stopped, Sarah was gone. Not dead, not yet, but gone in every way that mattered. The paramedics said she probably didn't feel anything. I don't know if I believe them. Clara's throat constricted. She wanted to open her eyes, to sit up, to tell him he didn't have to do this. But she couldn't move. Couldn't break the spell of his confession. Couldn't stop him from finally saying the things he'd clearly carried alone for too long. "She died 3 hours later at Mount Sinai," Daniel continued. "I was holding her hand, and Emma was in the waiting room with my mother, and Sarah just slipped away, like falling asleep, like the easiest thing in the world. And I remember thinking that it was wrong, that dying shouldn't look peaceful when it left so much chaos behind." The paramedics were closer now, their boots splashing through puddles, their voices coordinating the response. Daniel's time was running out. "I became someone different that day," he said quickly, the words tumbling out faster now. "I became a single father who didn't know how to braid hair or which princesses Emma liked or how to pack a lunch that wasn't completely nutritionally bankrupt. I became a man who had to wake up every morning and choose to keep going even though half of me wanted to stay in bed and never move again. I became someone who understood that life doesn't care about your plans, that everything you build can disappear in the time it takes for someone else to run a red light." His hand squeezed hers tighter. "And I learned something else too. I learned that the only thing that matters, the only thing, is who stays when everything falls apart. A stranger stayed with Sarah, held her hand until I got there. I never learned his name, never got to thank him, but he stayed when he didn't have to. And I think about that every day. I think about how a stranger gave my wife dignity in her last moments, how he made sure she wasn't alone." "Sir, we need you to step back." A paramedic's voice, professional and firm. "One more second," Daniel said. "Please, one more second." The paramedic must have seen something in his face, must have recognized the desperation of someone who needed to finish what they'd started, because she nodded and turned to assess Marcus instead. "I work for you because I need purpose," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper now. "I need structure and deadlines and someone to serve because if I stop moving, if I stop being useful, I'll remember that I'm a man who couldn't save his wife. Emma needs me to be strong, and being your assistant makes me strong. You make me strong, even though you don't know it, even though this is just a job to you." He leaned closer, close enough that Clara could feel his breath against her face. "But right now, in this moment, I need you to know that you're not just a job. You're not just a paycheck or a career move or a line on my resume. You're a person who remembered my daughter's science project. You're someone who pretends not to care, but authorized a college fund for Emma last Christmas and thought I didn't notice. You're someone worth saving, worth staying with, worth fighting for." A tear slipped from Clara's closed eye before she could stop it. Time froze. Daniel went completely still, his hand locked around hers. She heard him draw in a sharp breath, felt him lean back slightly. "Clara?" His voice was different now, shocked, uncertain, afraid. "Can you hear me?" She could keep lying. She could play unconscious until the paramedics took her away, could pretend this conversation never happened, could maintain the professional distance that had served her so well for so long. But she was so tired of pretending. Clara's eyes opened slowly, focusing on Daniel's face hovering above her. He looked wrecked, rain-soaked and bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow, his shirt torn, his eyes red-rimmed with tears he hadn't let fall. He looked human in a way she'd never seen before, stripped of the professional polish that usually defined him. "I heard everything," she said quietly. Daniel jerked back as if she'd slapped him, his face cycling through shock, embarrassment, horror. Ms. Whitmore, I didn't mean, I thought you were—" "I heard everything," Clara repeated, pushing herself up slowly despite the protests of her ribs and the screaming in her head. The rain hit her face, cold and clean and real. "And I need you to know that you're wrong about one thing." Daniel stared at her, speechless. "You didn't work for me because I made you strong," Clara said. "You were already strong. You were already everything you needed to be. You just needed a place where strength mattered again, where showing up every day meant something." She reached out, her hand finding his face, her thumb brushing the cut above his eyebrow. "And you're wrong about something else, too." "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "This was never just a job. Not to me. Not for a long time." The admission cost her something, some piece of the armor she'd worn for so long it felt like skin. "I'm just not very good at showing it." The paramedic chose that moment to intervene, gently but firmly pushing Daniel aside so she could assess Clara's injuries. More emergency personnel swarmed the wreckage, extracting Marcus from the driver's seat, securing the scene, asking questions that Clara answered automatically while her eyes stayed locked on Daniel. He stood in the rain, bleeding and shaking, looking at her like she was a stranger, or maybe like she was someone he was seeing clearly for the first time. The ambulance ride was a blur of bright lights and vital signs, of paramedics asking her to follow their fingers with her eyes, to rate her pain on a scale of 1 to 10, to list her medications and allergies and emergency contacts. Daniel rode with her, refusing to be checked out separately despite the protests of the EMTs. He sat on the bench across from her, his hands gripping the edge of the seat, his eyes never leaving her face. "You should have told me," he said finally, his voice rough. "Told you what?" "That you were conscious, that you could hear. You should have—" He stopped, shaking his head. "What was that? Why did you do that?" Clara watched the IV line in her arm, watched the saline drip steady and measured and completely under control, so unlike everything else in her life right now. "I wanted to know who would stay," she said finally. "I wanted to know who I was when the power was gone." "And did you find out?" She met his eyes. "I found out that I'm someone who's been incredibly stupid for a very long time." The hospital admitted her for observation, possible concussion, 3 cracked ribs, various contusions and lacerations that would hurt like hell tomorrow, but weren't life-threatening. They put her in a private room that her insurance could easily afford, with a view of the parking lot and the kind of industrial beige walls that defined every medical facility in America. Daniel refused to leave. "You have a daughter," Clara pointed out, accepting the ice pack the nurse handed her for her head. Emma's probably worried sick. My mom's with her. She knows there was an accident, knows we're both okay. Daniel slumped in the visitor's chair, looking like death warmed over. I texted her from the ambulance. You should go home, get some rest, come back tomorrow when you don't look like an extra from a horror movie. I'm staying. Clara studied him, the set of his jaw, the stubborn light in his eyes, the way his hands gripped the arms of the chair like he was physically preventing himself from bolting. Why? Because someone stayed with Sarah, he said simply, and because you asked who would stay for you. So I'm answering, I'm staying. The hospital room fell quiet except for the beep of monitors and the distant sounds of the ER. A baby crying, someone paging a doctor, the squeak of wheels as a gurney rolled past. Clara lay back against the pillows, her body starting to catalog all the ways the accident had damaged her, pain blooming in places she'd barely noticed in the chaos. Tell me about her, Clara said quietly. Your wife. Tell me about Sarah. Daniel's head snapped up, surprise flickering across his face. You don't want to hear about that. I do. I really do. Clara shifted, wincing at the protest from her ribs. You've worked for me for 3 years and I never asked. I knew she died. It was in your employment records. But I never asked about who she was. I never asked about what you lost. For a long moment, Daniel didn't speak. Then slowly, the words came. She was funny. Not in a big, obvious way, but in these small, perfect moments. Like she'd leave notes in my lunch when I was having a hard week at work, just stupid puns about sandwiches that somehow made everything better. She sang off-key in the shower and refused to be embarrassed about it. She cried at commercials, the really manipulative ones with puppies and Christmas music. His voice softened, memory smoothing some of the rough edges. She wanted to be a teacher, elementary school, 2nd grade specifically, because she said that's when kids still loved learning but were old enough to think critically. She had this whole philosophy about education and imagination and not crushing creativity in favor of standardized test scores. He smiled, sad and distant. Emma inherited her passion for learning. Every time my daughter asks why about something, I hear Sarah's voice. What would she think about you working for me? Clara asked. Daniel considered the question. She'd probably say I was avoiding therapy by burying myself in work. She'd be right. But she'd also understand that I need purpose, that taking care of you and managing your schedule gives me a reason to get up in the morning when depression tells me to stay in bed. Taking care of me, Clara repeated. Is that what you call it? What would you call it? She didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, she had several answers, none of which she was ready to say out loud in a hospital room at 2 a.m. while her entire world was still spinning from a crash that should have killed them both. The college fund, she said instead. How did you know about that? Daniel's ears turned red. I process all your personal financial transactions. It's part of my job. When I saw a $50,000 transfer to an account in Emma's name, I may have cried for like 20 minutes in the bathroom. It seemed practical. Good employees should be able to afford college for their children. It's an investment in future productivity. Right. Productivity. Daniel's smile was gentle, knowing. That's definitely the only reason. Don't make this into something it's not. I'm not making it into anything. I'm just acknowledging what it already is. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to hide behind the corporate speak and professional boundaries that had protected her for so long. But lying in a hospital bed with her ribs screaming and her head pounding and the taste of blood still on her tongue, she found she didn't have the energy for it anymore. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. Do what? This, whatever this is. Being human at someone instead of just being effective. I've spent my entire adult life building walls, and I built them so high and so strong that I can't remember what it's like on the other side. Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes intense. Then we figure it out together. One day at a time, one conversation at a time. You don't have to tear down all the walls at once. You just have to leave the door unlocked occasionally. I'm not good at occasionally. I've noticed. You're all or nothing, always have been. It's part of why you're brilliant at business and terrible at relationships. Clara raised an eyebrow. You're insulting me in my hospital bed. That seems unprofessional. We crossed the line from professional about 3 hours ago when I confessed my life story while you were fake unconscious in a wrecked car. Fair point. A nurse came in to check her vitals, breaking the strange intimacy of the moment. Clara submitted to the routine assessment, answering questions automatically while her mind raced through the implications of everything that had happened tonight. Tomorrow, no, later today, since it was already well past midnight, she had the Singapore call at 5 a.m. She had the Brennan Group breakfast at 7:30. She had a full schedule of meetings and decisions and responsibilities that wouldn't pause just because she'd nearly died. "You're thinking about work," Daniel observed once the nurse left. "How do you know?" "Because I know you. The Singapore call is already rescheduled for next week. The Brennan meeting is moved to Friday. Your entire schedule for the next 3 days is cleared except for essential sign-offs that I'll bring to you here." Clara stared at him. "You did all that from the ambulance?" "I did all that from the scene of the accident, actually. While you were fake unconscious, multitasking." He stood up, stretching muscles that had to be screaming after the crash. "I also called your sister to let her know what happened. She's flying in from Boston tomorrow morning." "Miranda's coming here?" "You were in a car accident. Of course she's coming." "We're not that close." "She's your sister. She's coming." Daniel moved to the window, staring out at the parking lot where the rain was finally starting to taper off. "And she'll probably yell at me for not calling her sooner, but that's a problem for tomorrow." Clara watched him, the line of his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man who'd learned to carry weight he never asked for. "You should go home," she said again, softer this time. "Emma will want to see you're okay." "I video called her from the waiting room. She made me promise to give you her get-well drawings as soon as you were awake enough to appreciate them." He pulled out his phone, showing Clara a series of crayon masterpieces, a slightly lopsided car with everyone inside smiling, a rainbow that took up most of the page, and what appeared to be either a cat or possibly a very unfortunate dog. "She's 8. Everything's fixable with crayons and glitter." "I wish that were true." "So does everyone who isn't 8. Daniel pocketed his phone. "But she's not wrong that some things are fixable. Maybe not with crayons, but fixable nonetheless." "And you think we're fixable? Whatever 'we' is?" "I think," Daniel said carefully, "that you spent 3 years being my boss and 30 seconds being human with me in a wrecked car changed everything. I think you're terrified of what that means. I think I'm terrified too, but I also think that terror means it matters, and things that matter are worth being afraid for." Clara's throat tightened. "You're very articulate for someone who's been awake for 22 hours and survived a car crash. Sarah used to say I got philosophical when I was exhausted. Something about lowered inhibitions making me honest." He turned from the window, meeting her eyes. "So here's some brutal honesty. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if this changes anything about our working relationship, or if we just pretend it never happened and go back to calendar management and coffee orders. But I know that I've spent 3 years half in love with a woman I could never let myself actually care about because she was my boss and I was her employee, and crossing that line seemed impossible." Clara's heart stuttered. "Daniel, I'm not asking for anything," he interrupted. "I'm just telling you the truth because we're already here, because the line's already crossed, because pretending seems stupider than just saying it out loud. You asked who would stay when the power was gone. I'm staying. I stayed for a stranger with my wife, and I'm staying for you because you're not a stranger anymore. You haven't been for a long time." The machines beeped. The hospital hummed. The world kept turning despite the fact that Clara Whitmore's carefully constructed reality had just been demolished as thoroughly as the car they'd crashed in. "I don't know how to do this," she said again, helpless. "You already said that." "It bears repeating." Daniel crossed back to the chair, sinking into it with a groan that spoke of his own injuries catching up to him. "Then let's start with something simple. Tomorrow, later today, you're going to rest because the doctor said so and because your ribs need time to heal. I'm going to go home, take Emma to school, and then come back here with actual food because hospital breakfast is an abomination. That's your grand plan? Food? It's a start. Small steps, remember? We don't have to figure out the whole future in one night. I'm not good at small steps. I know, you're going to hate it. But you're going to do it anyway because for once in your life, Clara Whitmore, you're going to let someone take care of you instead of being the one in control of everything. She wanted to argue. Every instinct she had screamed at her to take charge, to manage the situation, to turn this into something she could control and optimize, and fit neatly into her life without disrupting the careful balance she'd maintained for so long. But she was so tired. Tired of being strong. Tired of being in control. Tired of pretending that the walls she'd built were protection instead of prison. "Okay," she whispered. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "Okay? Don't make me repeat it. I'm concussed." "You're not concussed." The doctor said, "I'm claiming concussion for the next 24 hours. It gives me plausible deniability for any stupid decisions I make." Clara managed a smile despite the pain. Like agreeing to let my assistant bring me breakfast and take care of me like I'm a person instead of a corporation. "You are a person," Daniel said gently. "You've always been a person. You just forgot for a while." Maybe he was right. Maybe she had forgotten, so focused on quarterly earnings and market share and building an empire that she'd lost track of the woman underneath the CEO title. Or maybe she'd never really known that woman at all, too busy becoming successful to figure out who success was supposed to serve. "Tell me something," Clara said, her eyelids growing heavy as exhaustion and painkillers started to drag her under. "In the car you said I made you strong. But how? I'm just your boss. I'm just the person who signs your paychecks." Daniel was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, "You have standards. Incredibly high, sometimes impossible standards. And every day I meet them. Every time I anticipate what you need before you ask for it. Every time I solve a problem you didn't even know was coming. I prove to myself that I'm still capable. That Sarah's death didn't break me so completely I can't function. You make me strong because you demand strength, and rising to meet your expectations reminds me I'm more than just a grieving widower." That's a lot of pressure to put on a working relationship. "Yeah, it is, but it worked until about 3 hours ago, when everything changed. And now? Now I don't know. Now we figure it out. Small steps, remember?" Clara let her eyes close, let the exhaustion finally win. "Small steps," she agreed. "Starting with sleep." "Starting with sleep," Daniel confirmed. She heard him settle deeper into the chair, heard the creak of cheap vinyl and the rustle of his damaged clothes. "I'll be right here. You should go home." "I'm staying." "Daniel?" "I'm staying, Clara. Go to sleep." So she did, falling into darkness with the knowledge that for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone was staying. Not because she paid them to, not because they wanted something from her, not because of her title or her power or her ability to make their careers, just because she mattered, just because she was worth it. The rain had stopped by the time she slipped into sleep, leaving behind the clean smell of wet pavement and new beginnings. The world washed fresh and waiting to see what would grow in the aftermath of the storm. Clara woke to pale morning light filtering through industrial blinds and the persistent beep of medical equipment that had become the soundtrack of her night. Her ribs announced themselves immediately, a sharp reminder that pretending to be unconscious in car wrecks had consequences. She shifted carefully, testing the limits of movement, and found Daniel exactly where he'd been when she fell asleep, slumped in the vinyl visitor's chair, his head at an angle that would absolutely destroy his neck, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked terrible. The cut above his eyebrow had been cleaned and butterfly bandaged at some point during the night, probably by a nurse who'd taken pity on him. His shirt was still torn, still stained with blood that could have been his or hers or Marcus's. His face was shadowed with exhaustion and the beginning of a bruise along his jaw that Clara didn't remember from the accident. He'd stayed. The reality of it settled over her like weight, like responsibility, like something precious she didn't quite know how to hold. Daniel Harper, who had every reason to go home to his daughter, to his own bed, to his own life, separate from the woman who controlled his paycheck, had chosen to spend the night in an uncomfortable chair because someone had once stayed with his dying wife. Because Clara had asked who would stay when the power was gone, and he'd answered with his presence. "You're staring." Daniel's voice was rough with sleep, his eyes still closed. "I can feel you staring. You look like hell." "Good morning to you too." He opened one eye, then the other, wincing as he straightened in the chair. "How are the ribs?" "Angry. How's your neck?" Making excellent arguments for why sleeping in chairs is a terrible idea. He rolled his shoulders, grimacing. "What time is it?" Clara checked the clock on the wall. 6:15, you missed your 5 a.m. wake-up call. I rescheduled my entire life, remember? No 5 a.m. calls for the next 3 days. Daniel stood slowly, testing his own injuries. I should go home, shower, make sure Emma gets to school. I'll be back by 9 with actual food and possibly coffee that doesn't taste like regret. You don't have to come back. The words came out automatically, a reflex born from years of not needing anyone, not asking for anything, maintaining the careful distance that kept her safe and separate. But even as she said them, Clara knew they were a lie. She wanted him to come back. She wanted him to bring terrible hospital coffee and Emma's crayon drawings and the quiet competence that had somehow become essential to her life. Daniel heard the lie too. She could see it in the way his mouth curved, not quite a smile, but something gentler. I'll be back by 9, he repeated. Try not to check your email compulsively while I'm gone. I'm not allowed to have my phone. Doctor's orders. Since when do you follow doctor's orders? Since I have 3 cracked ribs and a concussion, I'm totally not claiming for plausible deniability anymore. You never had a concussion. You were lucid and responsive at the scene. Details. Clara waved her hand dismissively, then regretted it as her ribs protested. Fine. I'll be a model patient. I'll rest. I'll accept my limitations. I'll let the nursing staff handle things without micromanaging. Daniel's expression turned skeptical. I'll believe that when I see it. He left with a promise to check on Marcus, who'd been discharged around midnight with nothing more serious than bruised ribs and whiplash. Clara watched him go, watched the door close behind him, and felt the weight of solitude settle back over her like a familiar coat that no longer fit quite right. The morning passed in increments measured by nurses checking vitals and residents asking the same questions about her pain level and whether she could feel her extremities. Clara answered automatically, her mind elsewhere, turning over the events of last night like stones in her hand. Daniel's confession in the rain, her decision to stop pretending. The way everything had shifted in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Her sister arrived at 8:30, bursting through the door with the energy of someone who'd caught the first flight out of Boston and mainline coffee for 2 hours straight. Jesus Christ, Clara. Miranda Whitmore Chen dropped her bag on the floor and crossed to the bed in 3 strides. When your assistant calls to tell me you've been in a car accident, you could at least have the decency to look more injured. You look fine. You look better than fine. I was expecting machines and tubes and drama, Clara interrupted. Sorry to disappoint. Just some cracked ribs and bruising. I'll survive. Miranda sank into the chair Daniel had vacated, studying Clara with the penetrating gaze they'd both inherited from their mother. 3 years younger, but somehow always seeming older, Miranda had made different choices. Marriage to a software engineer, 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, a career as a nonprofit director that paid a fraction of what Clara made, but seemed to bring actual satisfaction. Your assistant sounded destroyed on the phone, Miranda said quietly. Daniel, right? He was very professional, very composed, but I could hear it underneath, like he was barely holding it together. He was in the accident too. I know, he told me, but he wasn't calling about himself, Clara. He was calling about you, making sure your family knew, making sure you wouldn't be alone. That's not normal assistant behavior. Clara looked away, focusing on the parking lot visible through her window. We work closely together. Uh-huh. And I work closely with my entire staff, but none of them would spend the night in a hospital chair for me. Miranda leaned forward. What's going on? Nothing's going on. Daniel takes his job seriously. He's thorough. Thorough. Miranda's laugh was sharp. Right, thorough. That's definitely what that was. Before Clara could respond, a knock at the door preceded a nurse wheeling in breakfast, if the gelatinous eggs and rubbery toast could be called breakfast. The nurse checked Clara's IV, asked the standard questions, and left them alone again with the remains of what hospitals optimistically called food. You're not eating that, Miranda observed. Absolutely not. Smart woman. Miranda pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. I'm ordering actual food. What do you want? Daniel's bringing something at 9. Miranda's thumbs paused mid-text. Daniel's coming back. He said he would. Of course he did. The typing resumed. I'm ordering anyway. Hospital food is an abomination, and you need protein for healing. Also, I want to meet this assistant who's thorough. Clara felt heat creep up her neck. There's nothing to meet. He's just... If you say, just my assistant one more time, I'm going to throw this terrible hospital coffee at you. Miranda's eyes softened. Clara, I've known you for 38 years. I've watched you build walls so high you need oxygen to see over them. And I've never, not once, heard you talk about an employee the way you're not talking about Daniel right now. I don't know what you mean. You're a terrible liar. You always have been. Remember when you were 16 and told Mom you were studying at Katie's house, but you were actually at that concert in Providence? You had the same look on your face then that you have right now. I don't have a look. You absolutely have a look. It's your something significant happened, but I'm not ready to process it. Look. Miranda set her phone aside. So what happened? And don't say just a car accident, because car accidents don't put that expression on people's faces. Clara wanted to deflect, to change the subject, to retreat behind the professional persona that had served her so well for so long. But she was tired of pretending, tired of holding everything so tightly that her hands cramped with the effort. And Miranda, for all her annoying younger sister tendencies, had never betrayed a confidence. I pretended to be unconscious, Clara said quietly. After the crash, I was completely aware, completely lucid, but I kept my eyes closed. I wanted to see who would stay. Miranda went very still. And Daniel stayed. He checked my vitals, kept the crowd back, covered me with his jacket. Clara's voice dropped lower. And he told me things. About his wife. About losing her. About why he works for me. Things he never would have said if he thought I could hear. What kind of things? Clara told her. Not everything. Some of Daniel's confession felt too raw, too private to share even with her sister. But enough. Enough for Miranda to understand what had shifted in that wrecked car, what had changed when Clara opened her eyes and admitted she'd heard everything. When she finished, Miranda sat back in her chair, her expression cycling through surprise, understanding, and something that looked like cautious hope. So you've been in love with your assistant for how long, exactly? I'm not... Clara stopped, the denial dying on her lips. I don't know. Maybe always, maybe never. Maybe it just became possible last night when everything else became impossible. That's very poetic for someone who deals in quarterly earnings and market projections. Concussion. You don't have a concussion. Miranda's smile was gentle. But you do have feelings, apparently. Actual human feelings for an actual human person. I'm honestly shocked. You're enjoying this too much. I'm enjoying this exactly the right amount. Do you know how long I've waited for you to care about something other than stock prices and merger agreements? Miranda reached out, taking Clara's hand. You've been half alive for so long, Clara. Since Dad died, since you took over the company, since you decided that being successful meant being alone. I've watched you build this empire and wondered if you even remembered what you were building it for. The words hit harder than Clara expected, striking some tender place she'd protected for so long she'd forgotten it existed. I built it because someone had to, because Dad believed I could, because the company needed leadership, because it was easier than feeling anything, Miranda interrupted. Because numbers don't hurt you, and employees can be managed, and success is measurable in ways that relationships aren't. Because being the best at business meant you never had to risk being vulnerable at being human. Claire's throat tightened. That's not fair. It's completely fair. It's also completely understandable. Dad's death broke something in you, and you patched it with ambition and achievement and never letting anyone close enough to break you again. Miranda squeezed her hand. But Daniel got close anyway, didn't he? Somehow, when you weren't looking, he became more than just an employee. He became someone you trust, someone you need, someone you can't quite imagine your life without. I don't know what he became. I don't know what any of this means. Then figure it out. One conversation at a time, one day at a time, one small step at a time. Miranda smiled. Isn't that what he told you? Small steps? Before Clara could respond, the door opened and Daniel appeared, carrying 2 large paper bags that smelled infinitely better than hospital breakfast and a cardboard carrier with 3 coffee cups. He stopped short when he saw Miranda, his professional mask sliding into place so quickly Clara almost missed the flash of vulnerability underneath. I'm sorry, I didn't realize, Daniel started. You must be Daniel. Miranda stood, extending her hand. Miranda Chen, the sister. I'd say I've heard a lot about you, but Clara's been annoyingly tight-lipped, which tells me everything I need to know. Daniel shook her hand, confusion flickering across his face as he glanced at Clara. Everything you need to know about what? About the fact that you're not just an assistant. Miranda took one of the coffee cups from the carrier, inhaling appreciatively. Thank God. Actual coffee. The hospital stuff tastes like despair. Miranda, Clara warned. What? I'm just being honest. You like honesty. You said so yourself. Miranda claimed one of the paper bags, peering inside. Is this from Margot's? Their breakfast sandwiches are the best in the city, Daniel said, still looking slightly off balance by Miranda's energy. I got extras since I didn't know if Clara would have visitors. Smart man. I like you already. Miranda extracted a sandwich and headed for the door. I'm going to eat this in the waiting room and make some calls. Take your time, have conversations, process feelings, all that healthy, emotional stuff Clara usually avoids. She left in a whirlwind, the door clicking shut behind her with an air of finality that felt deliberate. Daniel stood frozen, holding the remaining coffee and food, his eyes on the door as if Miranda might return at any second with more cryptic comments. Your sister is intense, he said finally. She's a lot, Clara agreed, but she means well, usually. What did she mean about me not being just an assistant? Clara patted the bed beside her. Put the food down and sit. We should probably talk. Daniel moved slowly, setting the bags and coffee on the rolling table and pulling it closer before sinking into the visitor's chair. He'd showered and changed, Clara noticed. Clean jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes look darker, his hair still damp at the edges. He looked more human somehow, less like the polished professional who navigated her schedule and more like the man who'd confessed his grief in the rain. How's Emma? Clara asked, deflecting from the harder conversation. Worried about you. She made me promise to take a picture of you looking alive so she knows you're okay. Daniel pulled out his phone. Fair warning, she will absolutely show this to her entire third-grade class. You're about to become very popular with 8-year-olds. I can handle 8-year-olds. They're more rational than most board members. Clara attempted to smooth her hair, then gave up. Fine, take your picture. Daniel snapped a quick photo, typed something, and set his phone aside. She says get well soon and she'll make you more drawings. Apparently the cat dog situation from last night was unacceptable and she's redoing it. Tell her I love the cat dog exactly as it was. I'll tell her, but she's a perfectionist. Wonder where she gets that from. Daniel's smile faded as he met Clara's eyes. We should talk about last night. Yes, we should. Clara accepted the coffee he handed her, grateful for something to do with her hands. Where do you want to start? How about the part where you pretended to be unconscious and listened to me pour my heart out like some kind of emotional voyeur? Despite everything, Clara laughed, then immediately regretted it as her ribs protested. Okay, when you put it that way, it sounds worse than it was. How would you put it? She took a sip of coffee, buying time to organize her thoughts. I wanted to know who I was without the title, without the power, without all the things that make people treat me a certain way. And I wanted to know who would stay when all of that was gone. That's what you said last night. But Clara, I would have stayed anyway. You didn't have to trick me into being decent. I know. But I needed to know what you'd say when you thought I couldn't hear. I needed to know if the person I see every day, the professional, competent assistant who manages my life, if that's all you were, or if there was more underneath. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. And what did you find out? I found out that you're carrying grief I never acknowledged. I found out that you set up a college fund for Emma that I never thanked you for. I found out that this job means more to you than just a paycheck, and I've been too wrapped up in my own world to notice. Clara set her coffee down carefully. I found out that I'm someone who's been taking you for granted while you've been holding pieces of my life together that I didn't even realize were falling apart. You haven't been taking me for granted. I have. I absolutely have. You're brilliant at what you do, so brilliant that I stopped seeing the effort, stopped appreciating the 1,000 small things you handle, so I never have to think about them. You make my life work, Daniel, and I've been treating that like it's automatic instead of extraordinary. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's my job. That's literally what you pay me to do. No, your job is executive assistant. Your job description includes calendar management and correspondence and project coordination. It doesn't include staying with me in a hospital because someone once stayed with your wife. It doesn't include setting up college funds for children I've met exactly twice. It doesn't include caring about whether I remember Emma's science projects or notice when you're tired. Clara leaned forward despite the protest from her ribs. You've been giving me more than you're paid for, and I've been taking it without question because it's easier than acknowledging what it means. And what does it mean? The question hung between them, heavy with implications and possibilities, and the weight of 3 years of careful professional distance. Clara could deflect again, could retreat into the safe territory of employer-employee relationships and appropriate boundaries. She could pretend that last night was an aberration, a moment of crisis that didn't reflect their normal dynamic. But she was so tired of pretending. It means I've been lying to myself about what you are to me, Clara said quietly. It means that somewhere in the last 3 years, you stopped being just my assistant and became someone essential. Someone I trust more than I've trusted anyone in a decade. Someone whose opinion matters, whose presence makes my life better, whose absence would leave a hole I don't know how to fill. Daniel's breath caught. Clara, let me finish, please. She gripped her coffee cup, anchoring herself to something solid. Last night you said you'd spent 3 years half in love with someone you couldn't let yourself care about, and I've been sitting here since I woke up, trying to figure out if I feel the same way or if I'm just emotionally compromised by painkillers and near-death experiences. But I think, her voice wavered, I think I've been half in love with you too. I just didn't let myself see it because seeing it would mean changing everything. The machines beeped. The hospital hummed. Daniel stared at her like she'd just announced she was joining the circus. You're half in love with me, he repeated slowly. Apparently. Clara Whitmore, who doesn't date, who barely acknowledges having emotions, who treats relationships like hostile corporate takeovers, you're half in love with your assistant. When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. Daniel stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. You're my boss. You sign my paychecks. You control my career. There are about 17 different HR policies about this exact situation, most of which I wrote because you hate dealing with human resources. I know. And even if there weren't policies, even if this wasn't the world's worst power dynamic, I'm a single father with an 8-year-old daughter and enough emotional baggage to fill a cargo plane. I wake up some mornings and still reach for my wife. I cry at insurance commercials because they remind me of planning a future that doesn't exist anymore. I'm not exactly a great romantic prospect. I'm not asking you to be a romantic prospect. I'm just telling you the truth. Daniel stopped pacing, his hands clenched at his sides. Why? Why tell me now? Why not just let us keep being boss and assistant and pretending that's all we are? Because I almost died last night. The words came out sharper than Clara intended. Because I spent 3 hours in a wrecked car and a hospital thinking about what matters, and the only thing I kept coming back to was you. Your voice in the rain, your hand holding mine, your decision to stay when you could have left. Because I'm 38 years old and I've built an empire, but I sleep alone and eat meals alone and spend every holiday working because it's easier than admitting I'm lonely. Her voice broke on the last word. Daniel crossed back to her in 2 strides, his hands finding hers, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. You're not lonely right now, he said quietly. No, I'm not. Because you're here. I'm here because I want to be, not because you're my boss, not because I'm paid to be, but because when I thought you might die last night, something in my chest cracked open, and I remembered what it feels like to care about someone enough that their pain becomes yours. Daniel's thumbs traced circles against her palms. But Clara, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be someone's whatever this is, when I'm still figuring out how to be myself again. Then we figure it out together. Small steps, remember? You're using my own words against me. You're a good teacher. Daniel's laugh was shaky, uncertain, but real. This is insane. This whole situation is completely insane. Probably. Does that mean you want to stop? He looked at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through doubt and fear and something that looked dangerously like hope. No, he said finally. I don't want to stop. I just want to be careful. For Emma's sake, for your company's sake, for both our sakes. We can't just... A knock at the door interrupted him. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers as Miranda poked her head in, her expression far too knowing for Clara's comfort. Sorry to interrupt what was clearly an important conversation, Miranda said, not sounding sorry at all. But the doctor's here to discharge you, Clara. Assuming you can follow basic recovery instructions without micromanaging your own healing process. I can follow instructions. Since when? The doctor arrived before Clara could respond, bringing discharge paperwork and a list of restrictions that made her want to argue on principle. No strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. Pain medication is needed. Follow-up appointment in 5 days. Someone needed to stay with her for the first 48 hours in case of complications. I'll stay, Daniel said immediately. The doctor nodded. Family member or close friend is ideal. You'll need to monitor for signs of concussion. She doesn't have a concussion, Daniel interrupted. She was alert and oriented at the scene, and she's been lucid since. But I'll monitor anyway. Clara watched him slip into competent caretaker mode, asking the right questions, taking notes on his phone, confirming medication schedules with the precision he brought to managing her calendar. This was what he did. He took chaos and organized it, took problems and solved them, took responsibility and carried it without complaint. And she'd been letting him do it for 3 years without really seeing the weight of it. Miranda drove them to Clara's penthouse in her rental car, maintaining a running commentary about Boston traffic versus New York traffic that required no response, and therefore saved Clara from having to make conversation. Daniel sat in the back, his phone out, already handling the logistics of 2 people's lives while recovering from his own injuries. The penthouse felt different when Clara walked through the door, or maybe she felt different, viewing the sleek minimalism through eyes that had spent the night in a hospital room. Everything was expensive and perfect and utterly devoid of personality. No photos, no clutter, no evidence that an actual human lived here instead of a very successful robot. This place is exactly like I imagined, Miranda observed, setting Clara's hospital bag on the marble kitchen counter. Beautiful and terrifying. It's efficient. It's a museum. Do you even cook in this kitchen? I have meals delivered. Of course you do. Miranda opened the massive refrigerator, finding it mostly empty except for expensive bottled water and some wilted salad greens. Right. I'm going grocery shopping. Daniel, what does she actually eat? Protein shakes for breakfast, salads for lunch, and whatever the restaurants deliver for dinner, Daniel answered, looking around the apartment with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. But she should probably eat more substantial food while she's recovering. Got it. Real food. What a concept. Miranda grabbed her purse. I'll be back in an hour. Try not to have any more emotional breakthroughs while I'm gone. You've hit your quota for the day. She left in another whirlwind, and suddenly Clara was alone with Daniel in her apartment, this space that had always been entirely hers, and the intimacy of it felt strangely overwhelming. You've never been here before, Clara said, watching him take in the view of Central Park. No, we always meet at the office or restaurants. I didn't even know where you lived until I had to list your address on the hospital paperwork. Daniel moved to the window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. It's beautiful and completely impersonal. I like things simple. You like things controlled. There's a difference. He turned to face her. Where do you want to rest? Bedroom? Couch? I'm not an invalid. I can sit like a normal person. You have 3 cracked ribs and you've been awake for 4 hours after spending a night in a hospital. Sit down before you fall down. Clara wanted to argue, but her body agreed with Daniel. She made it to the couch before her ribs reminded her that movement was a terrible idea. Daniel appeared with pillows, arranging them with the same efficiency he brought to everything, creating a nest that supported her injured side. I'm not good at being taken care of, Clara admitted. I know, you're going to be terrible at it. But you're going to let me anyway because the alternative is calling Miranda back here, and she'll be way more aggressive about enforcing rest. You make an excellent point. Daniel settled into the chair across from her, his phone buzzing with what were probably 50 messages about work emergencies that felt very far away right now. Emma wants to FaceTime later. She has questions about the accident that she's too polite to ask me, but will absolutely interrogate you about. What kind of questions? Whether it hurt, whether you were scared, whether I was brave. His smile was soft. She's trying to process the idea that bad things happen to good people. It's a hard concept when you're 8. And what are you telling her? The truth, that it was scary, that we were lucky, that sometimes bad things happen and we survive them and that makes us stronger. Daniel's eyes met hers. And that sometimes good things come from bad things, even when we don't expect them. Is that what this is? A good thing from a bad thing? I don't know yet. Ask me again after we figure out what this actually is. They sat in comfortable silence, the afternoon light shifting across the hardwood floors, the city humming 30 floors below. Clara's painkillers were wearing off, her ribs making their displeasure known, but she didn't reach for the prescription bottle yet. She wanted to be present for this, whatever this was, wanted to feel it fully instead of softening the edges with pharmaceuticals. Tell me something, Daniel said eventually. If the accident hadn't happened, if we'd just kept going the way we were, would you have ever said anything? Clara considered lying, considered offering some version of events where she eventually would have recognized her feelings and done something about them, but she'd promised honesty, and honesty meant acknowledging uncomfortable truths. No, she said. I would have kept pretending until you found someone else, or quit, or until we were both old and looking back wondering what might have happened if we'd been braver. I'm very good at pretending, Daniel. It's basically my superpower. Not anymore. You're terrible at it now. I can see everything on your face. That's the concussion. You don't have a concussion. Fine. It's the emotional breakthrough. Miranda says I've hit my quota. Daniel's laugh was warm, genuine. You're going to hate this, aren't you? Being vulnerable, being honest about feelings, all of it. Absolutely. It's going to be terrible. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page. He stood, stretching. I need to call Emma before she stages a revolt. Rest. Take your meds. Don't check your email. I don't even have my phone. I saw you eyeing your laptop when we walked in. Don't even think about it. He was right, of course. Her laptop was sitting on the desk in her home office, calling to her like a siren song. There were probably 100 emails that needed responses, decisions that couldn't wait, fires that needed putting out. But for once, Clara found she didn't care. The fires could burn. The decisions could wait. The empire she'd built could survive one day without her constant attention, because something more important was happening right here, in the sterile apartment that was finally becoming a home. Daniel stepped into Clara's home office to make the call, and through the half-open door she could hear his voice shift into dad mode, softer and more animated than the professional tone he used at work. Clara closed her eyes, listening to the cadence of his conversation without catching the words, and felt something in her chest loosen. This was real. This man with two entirely different voices, two entirely different lives that he somehow balanced while making it look effortless. He was real, and he was here, and he'd chosen to stay. The reality of it should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like finally exhaling after holding her breath for years. Miranda returned with enough groceries to feed a small army bustling through the apartment with the determined energy of someone on a mission. She'd bought vegetables and proteins and carbs that actually required cooking, things Clara's pristine kitchen had probably never seen. Within 20 minutes, the smell of something savory filled the apartment, and Clara realized she couldn't remember the last time her home had smelled like food instead of expensive air freshener. Your boyfriend's good with kids, Miranda called from the kitchen. I can hear him through the wall, very patient, very engaged. He's not my boyfriend, Clara said automatically. Right. He's just the man you're half in love with who's staying at your apartment to take care of you. Totally different thing. Daniel emerged from the office before Clara could respond, his phone in his hand and an expression that was equal parts amused and exasperated. Emma wants to talk to you. Fair warning, she has a list of questions. He handed Clara the phone, and suddenly she was looking at a gap-toothed 8-year-old with Daniel's dark eyes and what had to be her mother's curly hair pulled into two slightly lopsided ponytails. Emma was sitting at a kitchen table with homework spread around her, a purple pencil clutched in one hand. Hi, Miss Whitmore, Emma said, her voice carrying that peculiar seriousness that children adopt when talking to adults they want to impress. "Dad says you got hurt in the car crash, but you're okay now." "That's right. I'm okay. Just some bruised ribs." "Did it hurt a lot?" Clara glanced at Daniel, who was watching the interaction with an intensity that felt significant. She could lie, could soften the truth the way adults often did with children. But Emma had lost her mother to a car accident, and Clara suspected she deserved honesty more than most. "Yes," Clara said simply. "It hurt quite a bit, but the doctors gave me medicine and I'm healing." Emma nodded, processing this. "Were you scared?" "I was, but your dad was there and he took care of me, so I wasn't scared for very long." "Dad's good at taking care of people. He takes care of me all the time." Emma's expression turned shy. "He said you liked my drawings, the ones I made for you." "I loved them, especially the rainbow. And the cat dog was perfect exactly the way it was." "It was supposed to be just a cat," Emma admitted, "but I messed up the tail so I added dog ears to make it look intentional. Dad says that's called creative problem solving." Clara felt her lips curve into a genuine smile. "Your dad's right. That's exactly what it's called. I use creative problem solving at work all the time." "Really? What kind of problems?" For the next 10 minutes, Clara found herself explaining corporate strategy to an 8-year-old in terms of playground politics and trading snacks at lunch. Emma listened with the focused attention of someone genuinely interested, asking questions that were surprisingly insightful about why some people got to make decisions and others didn't, whether being in charge was lonely, and if Clara ever wished she could just play instead of working all the time. That last question hit harder than it should have. "Sometimes," Clara admitted, "sometimes I wish I remembered how to play." "Dad could teach you," Emma offered. "He's really good at playing. We have tea parties with my stuffed animals, and he does all the voices. Mr. Whiskers sounds like a pirate." Daniel, who'd been listening from across the room, turned an impressive shade of red. "Emma, I don't think Ms. Whitmore needs to know about my voice acting." "But you're really good at it. You should show her." "How about we let Miss Whitmore rest instead?" Emma's face fell slightly, and Clara found herself saying, "I'd love to hear the pirate voice sometime. But your dad's right that I should probably rest now. Thank you for calling, Emma. Your drawings are hanging on my refrigerator." This was a lie. They were actually in Clara's hospital bag, still in the living room. But Emma's face lit up so brightly that Clara made a mental note to actually hang them up as soon as she could move without her ribs screaming. After they said goodbye, Daniel retrieved his phone and stood there for a moment, looking at Clara with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to do that." "Do what?" "Talk to her like a person instead of a child. Most people talk down to 8-year-olds. Emma's clearly intelligent. Why would I talk down to her?" Clara shifted on the couch, trying to find a position that didn't make her ribs hate her. "Besides, she asked good questions. Better than most of my board members. She liked you. She was nervous about calling, worried you'd be too important to talk to her. I'm never too important for the people who matter." Daniel's expression softened into something that made Clara's chest tight. "See, that's the thing. You say you don't know how to be human, but then you do things like that. You talk to my daughter like she matters. You remember her science projects. You set up a college fund without making a big deal about it. You're better at this than you think you are. Or I'm just good at pretending." "No. Pretending is what you were doing before the accident. This is real." Miranda chose that moment to appear with plates of actual food, chicken and roasted vegetables and rice that smelled nothing like the sad hospital breakfast or the delivery meals Clara usually ate alone at her desk. They ate together, the three of them, and it felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Miranda told stories about their childhood, about the time Clara had organized a neighborhood business at age 10 that involved charging kids $5 to do their math homework. Daniel laughed, adding his own observations about Clara's organizational skills, and Clara found herself defending her 10-year-old self's entrepreneurial spirit while secretly enjoying the warmth of being known. After dinner, Miranda announced she was staying at a hotel, despite Clara's half-hearted protests about the guest room. "You two need space to figure out whatever this is," she said, pulling Clara into a careful hug that avoided her ribs. "And I need space to not accidentally overhear emotional conversations that will make family dinners awkward for the next decade." There won't be emotional conversations, Clara insisted. Ha. Keep telling yourself that. Miranda hugged Daniel too, which seemed to surprise him. Take care of her, and take care of yourself. You look like you got hit by a truck. Technically, a truck hit us. Even better reason to rest. Miranda grabbed her bag and headed for the door. I'll check in tomorrow. Try not to have any major life revelations without me. And then she was gone, and Clara was alone with Daniel in an apartment that suddenly felt too quiet and too intimate all at once. Daniel cleared the dishes without being asked, moving through her kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to manage a household alone. Clara watched him from the couch, watched the way his shoulders tensed when he thought she wasn't looking, the way he gripped the edge of the counter like he needed something solid to hold on to. You should rest too, Clara said quietly. The guest room is made up, or there's the other couch if you'd rather stay out here. Daniel turned to face her, his hand still gripping the counter. We need to talk about what happens next. I thought we were doing small steps, one day at a time. We are. But small steps still require direction. He moved back to the living room, sitting in the chair across from her instead of beside her, maintaining distance that felt deliberate. I can't be your assistant anymore, not if this... He gestured between them. Not if we're going to try to be something else. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. You're quitting? I'm saying we need to change the dynamic. The power imbalance alone is problematic, but there's also the fact that I can't be objective about your schedule or your needs if I'm emotionally invested in you as a person instead of as my employer. Daniel's voice was steady, professional, the same tone he used when presenting difficult truths in board meetings. It's not ethical. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me. Clara's chest constricted. She'd been prepared for a lot of outcomes from the last 24 hours, but losing Daniel entirely hadn't been one of them. So what are you saying? We just go back to how things were? No, I'm saying I transition out of the assistant role. We find someone else, someone you can trust, and I move into a different position. Or I leave the company entirely if that's what makes sense. His hands clenched on his knees. But I can't keep being the person who manages your life while also being someone who cares about you. Those two things can't coexist, Clara. Not in any healthy way. She knew he was right. Logically, professionally, she knew every word he was saying made perfect sense. But emotionally, the thought of losing the working relationship that had become the foundation of her daily existence felt like losing gravity. I need time to think about this, Clara said. I know. I'm not asking for an immediate decision. I'm just putting it on the table so we both know what we're dealing with. What do you want? Clara asked suddenly. Forget about ethics and power dynamics and what makes sense professionally. What do you actually want? Daniel was quiet for so long that Clara thought he might not answer. Then quietly, I want to take you to dinner and not have it be a working meal. I want to call you at the end of the day just to hear your voice, not to confirm tomorrow's schedule. I want to tell Emma about you without having to explain that you're my boss, and that's why I can't date you. His voice dropped lower. I want to kiss you without it being a lawsuit waiting to happen. Clara's breath caught. Have you thought about kissing me? For about 2 years now, possibly longer. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You have this habit of biting your lower lip when you're concentrating on financials. It's extremely distracting. I do not bite my lip. You absolutely do. You also tuck your hair behind your ear exactly 3 times before making major decisions, and you tap your pen against your teeth when you're thinking. I've cataloged all your tells because that's what good assistants do. Except somewhere along the way, cataloging your behavior stopped being professional observation and started being fascination. Clara felt heat creep up her neck. 2 years? Give or take, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when my boss is brilliant and terrifying became my boss is brilliant and terrifying, and I can't stop thinking about her. Daniel stood, pacing to the window and back. But it doesn't matter what I want if the situation is impossible. And right now, with me as your assistant and you as my employer, it's impossible. Then we make it possible. The words came out before Clara fully processed them, but once they were out, she committed to them. You're right that you can't keep being my assistant. So you're promoted. Chief of Staff, or VP of Operations, or whatever title makes sense. Someone else handles my calendar and coffee, and you do the things you're actually qualified for: strategic planning, executive coordination, the high-level work you've been doing anyway between managing my schedule. Daniel stopped pacing. You're creating a position for me. I'm recognizing that you've been doing the work of 3 positions and being paid for 1. You should have been promoted a year ago, but I was too selfish to let you move on because I needed you exactly where you were. Clara met his eyes. This isn't about us, Daniel. This is about the fact that you're brilliant, and I've been wasting your potential because it was convenient for me. And if I take the promotion, if we change the dynamic, then what? Then we try. We take small steps. We see if this thing between us is real or if it's just adrenaline and near-death experiences and 3 years of unexamined feelings. And if it's real, Clara's heart hammered against her damaged ribs, then we figure out what real means, together. Daniel crossed to the couch, kneeling beside it so they were at eye level. I need you to understand something. I'm not good at casual. I can't do the thing where we try this out and see what happens, and maybe it works, and maybe it doesn't. If we do this, I'm all in because that's the only way I know how to be. And that's terrifying for me because the last time I was all in, I lost everything. I'm terrified too, Clara admitted. I've spent my entire adult life avoiding exactly this kind of vulnerability. But last night, when I thought I might die, the only thing I regretted was all the chances I didn't take. All the moments I let slip by because I was too scared or too busy or too convinced that being alone was safer than being hurt. Being hurt is inevitable. That's what life is. A series of small hurts and occasional devastating losses interrupted by moments of joy that make it all worthwhile. Is that what Sarah taught you? Daniel's expression flickered with old pain. Sarah taught me that love is worth the risk, even when you know it might end badly. She used to say that choosing not to love because you're afraid of loss is like choosing not to live because you're afraid of dying. It's logical, but it misses the entire point. Clara reached out, her hand finding his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. I don't know how to love someone. I don't think I ever learned how. Then I'll teach you. Small steps, remember? Daniel's hand covered hers, holding it against his face. But Clara, I need you to be sure. I need you to be absolutely certain that this is what you want, because if we do this and it falls apart, I can't work for you anymore. I can't be in your life at all. It would hurt too much. I'm sure. The words came easier than Clara expected, solid and true. I'm terrified and uncertain about everything except that I want to try. I want to see what happens if we stop pretending and start being honest. I want to learn how to be the person who deserves someone like you. You already are that person. You just don't see it yet. They stayed like that for a moment. His hand over hers, her palm against his face, the city lights casting shadows across the room. Clara memorized the moment, the warmth of his skin, the intensity in his eyes, the feeling that something fundamental was shifting in her carefully controlled world. Then Daniel's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. It's your office. The Singapore deal hit a snag. Of course it did. Clara started to reach for the phone, then stopped herself. Can it wait until morning? Daniel's eyebrows shot up. I'm sorry. Who are you and what have you done with Clara Whitmore? I'm choosing not to work for one evening. Don't make a big deal out of it. This is a huge deal. This is unprecedented. I should document this moment. But he was smiling as he typed out a response. I'm telling them you're recovering and we'll address it first thing tomorrow. They're going to panic. Let them panic. It builds character. You're enjoying this too much. I'm enjoying watching you tell my company I'm unavailable. It's novel. Daniel set his phone aside, his expression turning serious again. We should establish some ground rules for this, whatever this is. Rules? Boundaries, parameters, ways to make sure we don't completely destroy our professional relationship while trying to build a personal one. He settled back into the chair, and Clara could see him shifting into organizational mode. First, we need to be transparent about the relationship with HR. No secrets, no hiding. If we're doing this, we do it properly. Agreed. Second, we need to maintain some level of professional separation. I can't be involved in decisions about my own compensation or performance reviews. Someone else needs to handle that. That makes sense. Third, we tell Emma before we tell anyone else. She needs to be prepared. needs to understand what's happening before she hears it from someone at school or sees something online. Clara's chest tightened at the mention of Emma. What if she's not okay with it? Then we move slowly. We give her time to adjust. She's my priority, Clara. She always will be. If this gets too complicated or too hard for her, I have to choose her. I wouldn't want you to choose anything else. Clara meant it. The fierceness of Daniel's commitment to his daughter was one of the things she admired most about him. But what do we tell her? How do we explain this? We tell her the truth in 8-year-old terms. That you and I care about each other, that we're going to try spending time together, that nothing changes about her and me. Daniel's voice softened. She'll probably be excited, honestly. She's been asking when I'm going to start dating again. Apparently some of her friends have stepmoms, and she wants to know why she doesn't. I'm not stepmother material. You talked to her about playground politics and creative problem solving for 10 minutes and had her completely charmed. You're more stepmother material than you think. The word stepmother sent a jolt of panic through Clara's system. This was real. This wasn't just two adults figuring out their feelings. This was potentially becoming part of a child's life, taking on responsibilities and roles she'd never considered before. Being someone Emma could count on, someone who showed up and stayed even when things got hard. I'm going to be terrible at this, Clara said. Probably. You're going to forget important things and schedule work calls during school events and struggle with the fact that 8-year-olds don't respond to logical arguments. Daniel's smile was gentle. But you'll also teach her things I can't. You'll show her what it looks like to be strong and successful and unafraid to take up space in the world. You'll be an example of someone who built something from nothing and didn't apologize for her ambition. You're giving me a lot of credit for someone who doesn't know how to play anymore. Then we'll teach each other. I'll teach you to play, and you'll teach Emma that work can be meaningful and satisfying. We'll figure it out together. That phrase again, together. Claire had spent so long doing everything alone that the concept felt foreign and frightening and strangely appealing all at once. Together meant sharing the burden. Together meant not having to be perfect all the time. Together meant someone else's opinion mattered. Someone else's needs had to be considered. Someone else had the power to hurt her if things went wrong. But together also meant not being alone anymore. And Clara was so tired of being alone. When do we start? She asked. We already started. Last night in the car, or maybe 2 years ago when I cataloged your lip-biting habit, or maybe 3 years ago when you hired me and I thought you were the most intimidating person I'd ever met. Daniel stood, stretching. But officially, we start tomorrow. After you've rested and I've processed the fact that my boss just told me she's half in love with me and I didn't immediately wake up from what is clearly a very elaborate dream. It's not a dream. Then pinch me so I can be sure. Clara reached out, and instead of pinching him, she caught his hand, pulling him closer. Come here. Daniel hesitated, then carefully sat on the edge of the couch, mindful of her injuries. This close, Clara could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the worry he'd been hiding, the weight of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Thank you, she said quietly, for staying, for being honest, for not letting me pretend anymore. You're welcome. But Clara, you should know I'm going to keep not letting you pretend. If we do this, if we really try, I'm going to push you to be real even when it's uncomfortable. I'm going to call you out when you retreat behind your walls. I'm going to ask you about your feelings and expect actual answers instead of corporate deflection. That sounds exhausting. It absolutely will be. But I think you need it. I think you've been waiting for someone to care enough to push. Someone who won't accept the polished version you show the world. Clara knew he was right. She'd been waiting for exactly that. Someone who saw through her armor, who refused to let her hide, who cared enough to demand honesty even when honesty was hard. She just hadn't expected it to be Daniel, hadn't expected it to happen in a wrecked car in the rain, hadn't expected it to terrify and exhilarate her in equal measure. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted. You keep saying that. And I keep believing you can. Daniel's hand squeezed hers. But you don't have to do it all at once. Small steps, Clara. Just small steps. What's the first small step? He considered this. The first small step is getting through tonight. You rest, take your medication, let your body heal. I sleep in the guest room and resist the urge to check on you every hour like a paranoid caretaker. Tomorrow, we have breakfast together like normal people instead of boss and employee grabbing coffee between meetings. And we see how that feels. Breakfast together. That's the grand plan? It's a start. You'd be surprised how revolutionary breakfast can be when you actually slow down enough to taste it. Clara thought about all the breakfasts she'd grabbed on the go, all the meals eaten at her desk while reviewing reports, all the mornings she'd started running and never stopped until she collapsed into bed 16 hours later. When was the last time she'd eaten breakfast with another person? When was the last time she'd done anything slowly enough to actually experience it? Okay, she said. Breakfast tomorrow, like normal people. See? You're already getting the hang of this. Daniel stood, and Clara felt the absence of his warmth immediately. He grabbed a blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over her carefully, his movements gentle and deliberate. Get some sleep, he said, and if you need anything during the night, I'm right down the hall. Don't try to be stoic and tough. Just wake me up. I'm always stoic and tough. Not anymore. New rules, remember? We're being real now. He left her there on the couch, the blanket warm around her shoulders. The apartment quiet except for the distant hum of the city outside. Clara closed her eyes and tried to process everything that had happened in the span of 24 hours. A car crash. A confession. A truth laid bare that changed everything. The beginning of something she couldn't name and didn't know how to navigate, but wanted desperately to try. Small steps, she reminded herself, just small steps. But even small steps required movement, required change, required leaving behind the safety of standing still. And Clara had been standing still for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to move forward into uncertainty. Somewhere down the hall, she heard Daniel moving around in the guest room, heard water running in the bathroom, heard the sounds of another person existing in her space. It should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt like coming home to a house that had been empty for too long, like walking into warmth after years in the cold. Clara pulled the blanket tighter and let herself imagine what tomorrow might look like. Breakfast with Daniel, real conversation instead of work updates, the possibility of building something that mattered more than quarterly earnings and market share, the possibility of not being alone anymore. Her ribs ached, her head hurt, her entire body felt like it had been through a car crash, which technically it had. But underneath all the physical pain was something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. And hope, Clara was discovering, was both terrifying and essential. It was the thing that made you vulnerable and the thing that made you brave. It was what you felt when you stopped protecting yourself long enough to want something real. She fell asleep on the couch in her own apartment with someone else breathing in the room down the hall. And for the first time in years, Clara Whitmore wasn't alone with her success and her empire and her perfectly controlled life that had somehow stopped feeling like enough. Tomorrow, they would have breakfast. Tomorrow, they would take the first small step. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change in ways Clara couldn't predict and couldn't control. And strangely, impossibly, she was almost ready for it. Morning arrived with pale sunlight streaming through windows Clara had forgotten to close and the smell of coffee brewing in her kitchen. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't place the sound of another person moving through her apartment, couldn't reconcile the domesticity of it with her usual solitary mornings. Then, memory flooded back. The crash, the hospital, Daniel staying, everything that had changed in the span of one rain-soaked night. Clara pushed herself upright carefully, her ribs reminding her that sudden movements were still a terrible idea. She could hear Daniel in the kitchen, the clink of dishes and the quiet hum of someone comfortable in their own skin. The clock on the wall read 7:15, which meant she'd slept nearly 9 hours straight. When was the last time that had happened? When was the last time she'd slept past 5 without an alarm jolting her awake to start the relentless march through another day? She made her way to the kitchen slowly, finding Daniel at the stove with a spatula in hand and her previously barren refrigerator suddenly full of ingredients that looked like they belonged in an actual home. He'd changed into jeans and a gray t-shirt that had clearly seen better days, his hair still damp from a shower, his feet bare against her cold tile floor. "You're cooking," Clara said, her voice still rough with sleep. Daniel glanced over his shoulder and his smile was warm and unguarded in a way it never was at the office. You're awake. How are the ribs? Angry but manageable. What are you making? Omelets. I figured protein would be good for healing, and Miranda bought approximately 17 dozen eggs yesterday, so we should probably use them. He gestured to the counter where fresh fruit had been cut into neat pieces, where orange juice sat in actual glasses instead of the bottles Clara usually drank from. Coffee's ready. I didn't know how you take it at home. Black, 2 sugars. Clara moved to the coffee pot, feeling strangely self-conscious in her own kitchen. You didn't have to do all this. I know, I wanted to. Besides, cooking is meditative for me. Sarah used to say I processed emotions through food. He flipped the omelet with practiced ease. After she died, I basically cooked everything in our house for 6 months. The freezer was so full my mom had to stage an intervention. Clara doctored her coffee, watching him work. There was something intimate about seeing Daniel like this, casual and domestic, existing in her space like he belonged there. What did you do with all the food? Gave most of it to neighbors and friends. Kept enough to make sure Emma and I didn't starve, but I was definitely using cooking as avoidance therapy. He plated the omelet and started another. My therapist eventually pointed out that while feeding people was nice, I should probably also deal with my grief instead of just sautéing it. You're in therapy? Have been since 6 months after Sarah died. Turns out raising a toddler alone while processing traumatic loss is hard, and I needed help figuring out how to do it without completely falling apart. Daniel met her eyes. Is that weird? Does that change how you see me? It makes me see you as someone smart enough to ask for help when you need it. That's rare. Clara took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through her chest. I've never been to therapy. Really? Not even after your dad died? The question was gentle, but it still hit like a punch. Clara gripped her coffee cup tighter. I dealt with it by working harder, by proving I could run the company, by making sure his legacy didn't fall apart, by being too busy to feel anything. And how did that work out? It built an empire. It also built walls so high I forgot what the view looked like from the other side. Clara watched him plate her omelet, the movements efficient and care-filled. Maybe I should have tried therapy instead. It's not too late. Therapy isn't just for crisis moments. It's also for people who want to understand themselves better, who want to break patterns that aren't serving them anymore. Daniel carried both plates to the small dining table Clara never used. But that's your decision. I'm not going to push. They sat down together, and Clara couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten breakfast at a table instead of standing at her kitchen counter or sitting at her desk. The omelet was perfect, fluffy, and filled with vegetables and cheese, seasoned exactly right. She took a bite and felt something in her chest crack open a little wider. This is good, she said quietly. Thanks. It's one of Emma's favorites. I make it every Sunday morning. Daniel paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. Actually, that's something we should probably talk about. Sunday mornings are sacred in our house. It's when Emma and I do our weekend planning, make breakfast together, just spend time being present. If you and I are going to try this, I need you to understand that Sundays are non-negotiable. You want me to respect your Sunday mornings. I want you to understand that Emma comes first, always. If we have plans and she needs me, I'm going to choose her. If there's a work emergency on a Sunday and she has a recital, I'm not going to be available. That's the deal. His eyes were steady, serious. I know that's not how you're used to operating. I know you expect availability 24/7, but I can't give you that and also be the father Emma deserves. Clara absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. Part of her. The part that had run a company for a decade, that expected immediate responses and total dedication, wanted to argue. But a larger part, the part that was learning to be human again, recognized the beauty in what Daniel was saying. He was setting boundaries. He was protecting what mattered. He was showing her what it looked like to have priorities beyond work. I respect that, Clara said. Actually, I more than respect it. I admire it. You're teaching me something I never learned, that some things are more important than being available. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. I wasn't sure how you'd take it. I'm taking it as a lesson in what healthy boundaries look like. Keep setting them. I'll keep learning to respect them. Clara took another bite of omelet. What does Emma do on Sunday mornings, besides planning and eating your cooking? It varies. Sometimes we go to the park. Sometimes we do art projects. Sometimes we just read together. Last Sunday, we built a blanket fort in the living room and watched nature documentaries inside it. His smile turned fond. She's obsessed with octopuses right now. Apparently, they're incredibly intelligent and can change colors and squeeze through tiny spaces. Sounds like she inherited her father's ability to absorb information. She inherited Sarah's curiosity and my tendency to organize everything into neat categories. Daniel's expression shifted, something vulnerable crossing his face. Can I ask you something? Of course. Does it bother you that I talk about Sarah so much, that she's still such a present part of my life even though she's gone? Clara set down her fork, giving the question the weight it deserved. No, it doesn't bother me. Sarah shaped who you are, shaped who Emma is. Pretending she didn't exist would be like asking you to erase part of your history. I don't want that. Some people find it uncomfortable. When I tried dating about a year after she died, this woman I went out with told me I needed to move on and stop bringing up my dead wife at dinner. Daniel's laugh was bitter. That was our last date. She was an idiot. Sarah isn't your past, Daniel. She's part of your present, woven into your life and Emma's life in ways that matter. Anyone who loves you has to understand that. The word love hung in the air between them, unexpected and heavy. Clara hadn't meant to say it, hadn't meant to put that concept on the table so soon. But now it was there, and Daniel was looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. Anyone who loves me, he repeated softly. Is that what we're talking about here? Love? I don't know, maybe. Eventually. Clara felt heat creep up her neck. I'm not good at this, at knowing what I feel or how to name it or when to say it out loud. Then we'll figure it out together. Small steps, remember? Daniel reached across the table, his hand covering hers. But Clara, I need you to know something. When I love someone, I love them completely. I loved Sarah with everything I had, and when she died, it almost destroyed me. If we do this, if we really try and it becomes real, I'll love you the same way, completely, without reservation. And that might be too much. It might be overwhelming. You need to be prepared for that possibility. Clara's throat tightened. What if I can't love you back the same way? What if I'm too damaged or too closed off or too fundamentally broken to give you what you need? Then we figure that out too. But Clara, you're not broken. You're just scared. There's a difference. His thumb traced circles against her palm. And being scared is okay. Being scared means you care enough to worry about messing this up. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence, the kind of quiet that exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. Daniel cleared the plates while Clara sat at the table, watching him move through her kitchen like he'd been doing it for years instead of hours. There was something profoundly settling about it, about having another person in her space, about not being alone with her thoughts and her coffee and her relentless drive to always be doing something productive. Her phone buzzed from the living room where she'd left it charging, and Clara felt the familiar pull of work calling. But she stayed at the table, stayed in this moment, chose presence over productivity for possibly the first time in her adult life. The world's not going to end if you don't check that, Daniel observed, returning from the kitchen. I know. I'm practicing not checking it. How's that going? It's uncomfortable. My brain is screaming at me that there might be emergencies. There are always emergencies. That's what emergencies do. They happen whether you're watching for them or not. Daniel sat back down across from her. But you have people who can handle them. You've built a team specifically so that you don't have to carry everything alone. Maybe it's time to let them do their jobs. Clara knew he was right. She'd hired brilliant people, paid them well, given them authority and responsibility. But she'd also undermined them constantly by swooping in to fix things, by not trusting them to handle crises without her input. It was control masquerading as leadership, and it had served her well until it stopped serving her at all. I don't know how to not be in control, Clara admitted. I know, but you're going to learn because the alternative is working yourself into an early grave and dying alone surrounded by quarterly reports. Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. Is that really how you want your life to look? No, but I don't know what the alternative looks like. I don't know how to be Clara Whitmore without the company consuming every waking moment. Then we find out together. We experiment. We try new things and see what sticks. Daniel leaned back in his chair. What did you used to do for fun? Before your dad died? Before the company took over? When you were just a person with interests and hobbies and a life outside of work? Clara had to think about it, had to reach back through years of relentless productivity to remember who she'd been before grief and ambition had reshaped her. I liked photography. Black and white, mostly, urban landscapes and architecture. I had a dark room in my first apartment and spent weekends wandering the city taking pictures. What happened to that? Dad got sick. The company needed me. Photography felt frivolous when there were actual important things to do. Clara traced the rim of her coffee cup. I sold all my equipment when I moved into this apartment. Told myself I didn't have time for hobbies. That's heartbreaking. It was practical. It was sad. You gave up something you loved because you decided loving things was a luxury you couldn't afford. Daniel's expression was serious. What else did you give up? The question opened a floodgate. Clara found herself listing all the small abandonments, the book club she'd quit, the yoga classes she'd stopped attending, the friends who'd eventually stopped calling when she canceled plans too many times. She'd streamlined her life down to work and sleep and the occasional meal, had eliminated everything that didn't directly contribute to her professional success. And she told herself it was necessary, told herself it was the price of being the best. But sitting across from Daniel in the morning light, Clara could see it for what it really was, a slow erasure of everything that made her human. I want to take you somewhere, Daniel said when she finished. Not today because you're still recovering, but soon. There's a place I go sometimes when I need to remember what matters. What kind of place? You'll see. It's a surprise. His smile was mysterious, but I think you'll like it. Or at least, I think you'll understand why I like it. Before Clara could press for details, her phone buzzed again, insistent and demanding. This time, Daniel stood and retrieved it, glancing at the screen before handing it to her. It's your office, the Singapore deal. He watched her face carefully. You don't have to answer. You can let it go to voicemail. Clara stared at the phone, feeling the weight of old habits pulling at her. The responsible thing would be to answer, to handle the crisis, to prove she was still in control despite the car crash and the injuries and the emotional upheaval. That's what Clara Whitmore would do. She'd push through the pain and get back to work because work was safe and work was familiar, and work never asked her to be vulnerable. But the person she was trying to become would make a different choice. Clara declined the call and set the phone face down on the table. Someone else can handle it. That's why I have a team. Daniel's expression shifted into something that looked like pride. That was hard for you. Excruciating. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to call them back. But you're not going to. I'm not going to. Clara took a shaky breath. This is what small steps look like, right? Choosing not to work for one morning, trusting other people to handle things? Exactly. And you're doing great. Daniel moved around the table, carefully pulling her to her feet. Come on, let's do something completely unproductive. Like what? Like watching terrible morning television and eating the fruit Miranda bought before it goes bad. Like existing in your apartment without an agenda. Like practicing the art of doing absolutely nothing. Clara let him guide her back to the living room, let him arrange pillows to support her ribs, let him cue up some mindless talk show that required zero brain power to follow. And for the next hour, she practiced the art of simply being. No emails, no calls, no strategic planning or crisis management. Just breathing and existing and letting the world turn without her hands on the wheel. It was terrifying and boring and strangely peaceful all at once. Around noon, Daniel's phone rang with a FaceTime call from Emma. He answered immediately, and suddenly Clara was looking at the gap-toothed 8-year-old again, this time in her school cafeteria with what appeared to be chicken nuggets and apple slices on a tray in front of her. Hi, Dad. Hi, Ms. Whitmore. Emma waved enthusiastically. Guess what I got on my math test? What did you get, sweetheart? Daniel asked, his entire face softening in a way Clara had never seen in 3 years of working together. A 98! I only missed one problem, and it was the tricky one about fractions. Emma's pride was palpable. Mrs. Martinez said I showed excellent work. I'm so proud of you. That's wonderful. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Daniel laughed. We can absolutely get ice cream, but you have to eat a real dinner first. That's what Grandma always says. Emma took a bite of chicken nugget, then turned her attention to Clara. Ms. Whitmore, are you feeling better? Do your ribs still hurt? They're healing, Clara said, and I'm very impressed by your math score. 98 is excellent. Thanks. I used the trick you taught me yesterday about checking my work twice before turning it in. It really helped. Emma's expression turned shy. Are you going to have dinner with us tonight? Dad's making spaghetti, and it's really good. Clara glanced at Daniel, uncertain. This felt significant. Dinner with Emma, being invited into their Sunday routine, crossing another line from professional to personal. Daniel's expression was carefully neutral, leaving the choice to her. I'd like that, Clara said. If it's okay with your dad. It's definitely okay, Daniel confirmed. Emma, we'll pick you up from Grandma's at 5, okay? And then Ms. Whitmore can come over for dinner. Can she see my octopus project? I've been working on it all week, and it's really cool. I'm sure she'd love to see it. They said goodbye, and Emma returned to her chicken nuggets and the complicated social world of third-grade lunch. Daniel set his phone down, his expression thoughtful. You don't have to come to dinner if you're not ready, he said. I know meeting Emma in person is different from FaceTime calls. I want to come. I'm nervous, but I want to. Clara shifted on the couch, trying to find a position that didn't make her ribs scream. What should I know? What are the rules? There aren't really rules, just be yourself. Emma responds to authenticity. She can tell when adults are being fake or talking down to her. Daniel considered. She'll probably ask you a million questions about everything from your job to your favorite color. Answer honestly, but age appropriately. And if you don't know how to answer something, it's okay to say that. What if she doesn't like me? The vulnerability in Clara's voice surprised even her. But the question was real. What if this smart, perceptive 8-year-old saw through all Clara's careful presentation and decided she wasn't worth her father's time? What if Emma recognized that Clara was someone who'd forgotten how to play, who'd given up photography and book clubs and everything that made life full? What if a child could see what Clara had spent years hiding, that she was lonely and scared and had no idea how to be part of a family? Daniel crossed to the couch, sitting beside her carefully. She already likes you. You talked to her about playground politics and creative problem solving. You made her feel smart and heard. That's all she needs. But what if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing or don't know how to interact with an 8-year-old? Or, Clara, breathe. Daniel's hand found hers. You're spiraling. You're catastrophizing. You're doing the thing where you try to plan for every possible outcome so you can maintain control. That's how I operate. That's how I've always operated. I know, but you can't control whether Emma likes you. You can't strategize your way into a good relationship with her. You just have to show up and be present, and let whatever happens happen. His thumb traced circles against her palm. And for what it's worth, I think you're going to be great with her. You were great with her yesterday. Just do that again. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist that yesterday was different because it was a screen and not real life, because FaceTime had distance and in-person had consequence. But Daniel was right. She was spiraling, trying to control something inherently uncontrollable. And maybe that was the real lesson she needed to learn, that some things required trust instead of strategy, faith instead of planning, vulnerability instead of armor. Okay, she said quietly. I'll show up and be present and try not to plan every conversation in advance. That's all I'm asking. Daniel squeezed her hand. Now, should we talk about the logistics? Because dinner at my place means you'll see my apartment, meet my mother who's probably going to interrogate you, and spend time in a space that's very different from this. Different how? It's small. It's cluttered with Emma's art projects and school papers, and about 17 stuffed animals. There are crayon drawings on the fridge and dishes in the sink, and it's lived in a way this place isn't. Daniel gestured around Clara's pristine penthouse. It's going to be chaotic and loud and very normal. You okay with that? Clara thought about her apartment, beautiful and sterile and empty of anything that suggested a real person lived there. She thought about eating meals alone, sleeping alone, existing in this expensive box 30 floors above the city. And she thought about what Daniel was offering, chaos and clutter, and the messy reality of a life actually being lived. I'm more than okay with that, Clara said. I think I need to see what normal looks like. They spent the afternoon in comfortable coexistence, Daniel working on his laptop while Clara dozed on and off, her body demanding rest even as her mind raced with everything that was changing. Around 4, she showered and changed into jeans and a sweater, casual clothes that felt strange after years of power suits and carefully curated professional wardrobes. When she emerged from her bedroom, Daniel looked up from his computer and smiled. "You look nice. Different, but nice." "I feel weird. I haven't worn jeans in probably 3 years." "They suit you. You look more relaxed." Daniel closed his laptop. "Ready to go?" The drive to Daniel's apartment in Brooklyn was filled with easy conversation about Emma's octopus project and what foods Clara should avoid if she didn't want an 8-year-old to judge her harshly. They talked about Daniel's mother, who'd been helping with Emma since Sarah died and had strong opinions about everything from vegetables to bedtimes. They talked about the Singapore deal that Clara still hadn't called about, and Daniel's reassurance that the team had handled it without her input. Daniel's building was a walk-up in Park Slope, the kind of pre-war structure with character and charm and probably plumbing that needed constant attention. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, and Claire could hear laughter from inside before he even opened the door. The space was everything Daniel had promised, small and cluttered and absolutely alive with evidence of people who cared about each other. Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator in a riot of color. Books overflowed from shelves. A blanket fort still occupied one corner of the living room, apparently a permanent fixture. And sitting on the couch was a woman in her 60s with Daniel's dark eyes and a smile that was equal parts welcoming and assessing. "You must be Clara," she said, standing to offer her hand. "I'm Diane Harper. Daniel's told me about the accident. How are you feeling?" "Sore, but healing, thank you." Clara shook her hand, aware she was being evaluated and trying not to care too much about the outcome. "Grandma, is she here yet?" Emma's voice came from down the hall, followed by the thunder of 8-year-old feet running at full speed. She skidded to a stop in the doorway, her eyes going wide when she saw Clara. "You're really here, in our apartment. This is so cool." Emma launched herself at Daniel for a hug, then seemed to remember her manners and turned to Clara with a more subdued smile. "Hi, Ms. Whitmore. Do you want to see my octopus project now or after dinner?" "Whichever you prefer," Clara said, suddenly very aware that she had no idea how to talk to children in person. "Now, definitely now." Emma grabbed Clara's hand with the unself-conscious confidence of someone who'd never learned to doubt her welcome. "It's in my room, and it has 8 tentacles, and did you know octopuses have 3 hearts? Dad helped me make them out of paper mache, and we painted them purple because that's the best color." She pulled Clara down the hallway, chattering about octopus facts and the difficulties of making tentacles look realistic. Daniel and his mother exchanged a look that Clara caught from the corner of her eye, something between amusement and concern and cautious hope. Emma's room was an explosion of color and creativity, every surface covered with art supplies or books or toys in various states of play. The octopus project sat on her desk, a surprisingly impressive creation for an 8-year-old, complete with carefully painted tentacles and googly eyes that gave it personality. "This is remarkable," Clara said honestly. "The detail work is incredible. Did you research what octopuses actually look like?" "I watched 3 documentaries, and I read 2 books from the library." Emma pointed to each tentacle. "See, they each have suction cups, but I made them out of bottle caps because Dad said that was creative problem solving, like what you told me about on the phone." They spent 20 minutes discussing octopus biology and art techniques before Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Dinner's almost ready. Emma, help Grandma set the table?" Emma bounded off with the same energy she'd arrived with, leaving Clara and Daniel alone in the small bedroom. He moved to stand beside her, looking at the octopus with fatherly pride. "You're good with her," he said quietly. "I'm terrified." "You hide it well." Daniel's hand found the small of her back, a touch that felt natural and right. "Come on, let's have dinner with my family." The meal was chaotic and perfect, and everything Claire's life had been missing. Emma talked nonstop about school and friends and the injustice of bedtimes. Diane told stories about Daniel's childhood that made him blush and Clara laugh. The spaghetti was delicious, the conversation was easy, and Clara found herself relaxing in a way she couldn't remember doing in years. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Clara her blanket fort, and Clara found herself crawling inside with Emma to watch part of a documentary about marine life. They lay on their stomachs on pillows and sleeping bags, Emma providing running commentary on everything the narrator said, and Clara discovered that she remembered how to do this, how to be present with another person, how to exist in a moment without agenda or strategy. When the documentary ended, Emma turned to Clara with her serious 8-year-old expression. "Ms. Whitmore, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" Clara's heart stuttered. She glanced toward the doorway where Daniel and Diane were cleaning up in the kitchen, clearly giving them space. "Would it be okay with you if I was?" Emma considered this carefully. "I think so. You're nice, and you know about creative problem solving, and you don't talk to me like I'm a baby. Plus, Dad smiles more when he talks about you." She paused. "Do you like my dad?" "I do, very much." "Are you going to make him sad?" The question hit Clara right in the chest. This child, who'd already lost her mother, who'd learned too young that people you love can disappear. She was asking the question that mattered most. Not whether Clara was nice or successful or good at her job, but whether she would hurt the person Emma loved most in the world. "I'm going to try very hard not to," Clara said honestly. "But Emma, I need you to understand something. Your dad and I are still figuring out what we are to each other. We might make mistakes. We might mess things up. But I can promise you that I care about him, and I care about you, and I'll always try to be honest with both of you." Emma studied her with those dark eyes that were so much like Daniel's. Then she nodded. "Okay, that's fair, but if you do make him sad, I'm going to be really mad at you." "That's completely reasonable?" "Good." Emma's expression brightened. "Want to see my collection of cool rocks? I found one at the park that might be a geode, but Dad says we need to crack it open to find out." They emerged from the blanket fort an hour later to find Daniel and Diane drinking tea at the kitchen table and clearly pretending they hadn't been talking about Clara. Emma was called to get ready for bed, protesting that it was too early despite the clock clearly showing it was past her usual bedtime. Diane excused herself to help with the bedtime routine, leaving Clara and Daniel alone. "How did it go?" Daniel asked. "She asked if I was your girlfriend and whether I was going to make you sad." "That sounds like Emma. What did you tell her?" "The truth. That we're figuring things out, that I care about both of you, and that I'll try not to hurt you, but I might make mistakes." Clara sat down across from him. "She said if I make you sad, she'll be really mad at me." Daniel's laugh was soft. "She's very protective. After Sarah died, she appointed herself my emotional guardian. She asks me every night if I'm happy, and if I say no, she tries to fix it with hugs or jokes or letting me pick the dinner menu. She's remarkable." "She is. And she likes you, which is saying something. Emma's usually pretty reserved with new people." Daniel reached across the table, his hand finding hers. "Thank you for being honest with her, for not making promises you might not be able to keep. I meant what I said. I'm going to try not to hurt you, but Daniel, I'm so bad at this. At relationships and emotions and being part of someone else's life, what if trying isn't enough? Then we'll deal with it when it happens. But Clara, you can't live your whole life afraid of messing up. You have to take the risk." His eyes were steady on hers. "And I'm willing to take that risk with you if you're willing to take it with me." Before Clara could respond, Emma appeared in her pajamas, her hair wet from the shower, dragging a stuffed octopus that looked suspiciously like her school project. "Miss Whitmore, I forgot to ask, what's your favorite color?" "I don't think I have one anymore. I used to like gray, but that feels like a sad answer." "It is a sad answer. Gray is boring." Emma climbed into her father's lap with the ease of someone who'd never doubted her welcome. "You should pick a better color. I like purple because it's the color of creativity and magic." "Then maybe I'll pick purple too." "You can't just copy me. You have to pick your own." But Emma was grinning, clearly pleased. "How about blue? Blue is calm and smart, and you seem calm and smart." "Blue sounds perfect." Emma yawned, her energy finally depleting. Daniel stood, lifting her with practiced ease. "Bedtime, sweetheart. Say goodnight to Clara." "Good night, Clara," Emma said, the title upgrade from Ms. Whitmore feeling significant. "Will you come back soon?" "If your dad invites me, I'd like that very much." "Dad, invite her back." I was planning on it, Daniel said, carrying Emma toward her bedroom. Say goodnight, Emma. Good night. And Clara, I'm glad you like my dad. He deserves someone who makes him happy. The simple statement, delivered with 8-year-old certainty, made Clara's eyes sting. She managed to smile and wave as Daniel disappeared down the hall, then sat alone in the small kitchen surrounded by evidence of lives fully lived. The drawings on the fridge, the school papers held by magnets, the photos of Emma at various ages, of Sarah smiling in moments frozen before tragedy struck. This was what she'd been missing. This warmth, this mess, this evidence that people had existed in a space and left marks of their presence. Her penthouse had none of this. No photos, no clutter, no proof that she was anything more than a ghost passing through beautiful rooms. Diane returned from helping with bedtime, pouring herself more tea and studying Clara with an expression that was kind but assessing. You survived dinner with an 8-year-old. That's impressive. Emma's wonderful. You've done an amazing job helping Daniel raise her. They've done the real work. I just provide backup and unconditional love. Diane sat down, cradling her mug. Can I be honest with you? Please. My son hasn't brought a woman home since Sarah died. He hasn't even mentioned being interested in anyone. So the fact that you're here, that Emma's already calling you Clara instead of Miss Whitmore, that Daniel looks at you like you hang the moon, that all means something. Diane's eyes were sharp. The question is whether you understand how much it means. Clara met her gaze steadily. I understand that Daniel's been through more than anyone should have to survive. I understand that Emma's been through the same. And I understand that if I'm going to be part of their lives, I have to be all in or not at all, because they've both already lost too much to risk casual. Good. Because if you hurt them, if you decide this is too complicated or too hard or too different from your perfect controlled life, it won't just break Daniel's heart, it'll break Emma's too. And that little girl has had enough heartbreak for one lifetime. I know. Clara's voice was steady. I'm terrified of exactly that. I'm terrified that I'm too damaged or too closed off or too fundamentally broken to be what they need. But I'm here anyway, because the alternative is walking away without trying, and I've spent too much of my life choosing safety over possibility. Diane's expression softened. You really care about him. I do. More than I knew I was capable of caring about anyone. They sat in silence for a moment, two women who loved the same man for different reasons, finding understanding in the space between words. Then Daniel returned, looking between them with mild apprehension. Should I be worried about what you two talked about while I was gone? We were just getting to know each other, Diane said innocently. Clara's delightful. You should keep her. I'm working on it. Daniel helped his mother gather her things, walking her to the door with promises to call tomorrow. When he returned, Clara was standing by the window, looking out at the Brooklyn street below. Your family is wonderful, she said quietly. They liked you too. Emma's already planning your next visit. Daniel moved to stand beside her. How are you feeling? Ribs okay? Tired, but good, really good, actually. Clara turned to face him. Daniel, I need to tell you something. His expression grew concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, everything's right, and that's terrifying. Clara took a breath. I've spent my entire adult life building walls and calling it strength. I convinced myself that being alone was the same as being independent, that not needing anyone made me powerful. But tonight, sitting at your table with Emma and your mother, being part of something warm and real and messy, I realized I've been lying to myself for years. Clara, let me finish, please. She reached for his hands. I don't know how to be what you and Emma need. I don't know how to be part of a family or how to balance work and personal life or how to be vulnerable without feeling like I'm losing myself. But I want to learn. I want to try. Because the alternative is going back to my beautiful empty apartment and my successful lonely life, and I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. Daniel pulled her closer, careful of her injuries. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just have to be willing to try. I'm willing. I'm terrified and uncertain and completely out of my depth, but I'm willing. Then that's enough. We'll figure out the rest as we go. He pressed his forehead to hers, and Clara felt something in her chest settle into place. Small steps, remember? Small steps, she agreed, starting with coming back for dinner next week, and maybe the week after that. And maybe eventually I stop being a visitor and start being someone who belongs here. You already belong here. You just don't see it yet. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist that belonging required more than one dinner and a conversation with an 8-year-old. But standing in Daniel's arms in his small Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by evidence of lives fully lived, she found she could almost believe him. Almost believe that she could become someone who fit in spaces like this. Someone who chose connection over control. Someone who remembered that empires meant nothing if you built them alone. Outside, the city hummed with evening traffic and distant sirens. Inside, Daniel held her like she was something precious, something worth keeping, something worth the risk of potential heartbreak. And for the first time in longer than Clara could remember, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The weeks that followed moved like water finding new channels, reshaping the landscape of Clara's life in ways both subtle and profound. She returned to work after her mandatory recovery period, walking into Whitmore Industries with her ribs still tender and her perspective fundamentally altered. The building looked the same, glass and steel reaching toward the sky, her name etched in letters that proclaimed success and power. But Clara saw it differently now, saw it as what it was, a monument to ambition that had cost her nearly everything that mattered. Her first act as CEO post-accident was to promote Daniel. The announcement came in a Monday morning executive meeting, and Clara watched the surprise ripple through her leadership team as she outlined his new role as chief of staff. Daniel would no longer manage her calendar or fetch her coffee. Instead, he'd coordinate strategic initiatives, liaison between departments, and handle the high-level work he'd been doing unofficially for years. The promotion came with a significant raise, an office on the executive floor, and most importantly, a reporting structure that removed the direct power dynamic between them. The second act was hiring Marcus's daughter, Rebecca, as her new executive assistant. Rebecca was sharp and organized and completely unfazed by Clara's reputation, which Clara appreciated. She was also young enough that she had no preconceived notions about how things had always been done, which meant she pushed back when Clara tried to schedule 18-hour days or skip meals entirely. Mr. Harper said you're supposed to eat lunch like a normal person, Rebecca said the first time Clara tried to work through the noon hour. And he said if you argue, I should remind you that you promised to practice better boundaries. Clara had laughed despite herself. He's not even my assistant anymore, and he's still managing me. He cares about you. That's different from managing you. Rebecca set a salad on Clara's desk with the kind of firm kindness that reminded Clara of Miranda. Eat. I'll hold your calls for 30 minutes. The third act was the hardest. Clara announced she'd be leaving the office by 6 every evening, with Fridays ending at 4. The board members looked at her like she'd announced she was joining the circus. Her competitors probably celebrated, assuming she was losing her edge. But Clara had spent enough nights in hospitals and enough evenings in Daniel's chaotic apartment to know that edge without purpose was just another way of cutting yourself. Miranda called 3 days into the new schedule, her voice tinged with disbelief. My assistant just told me you left your office at 5:45. Are you sick? Is this a side effect of the accident? Should I be worried? I'm fine. I'm just trying something new. You're leaving work at reasonable hours. This isn't new, Clara. This is revolutionary. Miranda paused. It's because of him, isn't it? You're not just an assistant. His name is Daniel, and yes, partially. But it's also because I looked at my life and realized I'd built something impressive and empty. I'm trying to fill the empty parts before I wake up at 60 and realize I missed everything that mattered. I'm proud of you, Miranda said quietly. I know that probably sounds condescending, but I am. You're finally choosing to live instead of just achieving. The words stayed with Clara through the afternoon, through the final meetings and strategic reviews, through the novel experience of walking out of her office while the sun was still visible in the sky. She drove to Brooklyn, navigating traffic with a patience she'd never possessed before, and arrived at Daniel's apartment at 6:30 to find Emma doing homework at the kitchen table and Daniel making what smelled like his famous chicken stir-fry. You're early, Emma observed, looking up from her math worksheet. Dad said you'd probably be late because work is hard to leave. I'm practicing leaving on time. Clara set down her bag and moved to look at Emma's homework. How's the math going? It's fractions again, and I hate it. Why do numbers need to be broken into pieces? It's confusing. Clara pulled out a chair and sat beside her, and together they worked through the problems using pizza slices as visual aids. By the time Daniel called them to dinner, Emma understood improper fractions, and Clara understood that she could be useful in ways that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings. Dinner had become a thrice-weekly ritual: Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings at Daniel's place, where Clara learned to navigate the rhythms of family life. She learned that Emma had strong opinions about vegetables, that Daniel sang off-key while cooking, that Diane visited every Sunday afternoon and always brought fresh bread from the bakery near her apartment. She learned to leave her work phone in her bag during meals, to participate in conversations about third-grade drama and weekend plans, to exist in moments without trying to optimize them. She also learned that falling in love was terrifying and wonderful, and nothing like she'd imagined. It happened gradually, in increments too small to measure individually, but profound in their accumulation. It was Daniel's hand finding hers while they watched Emma's school play. It was the way he listened when Clara talked about work frustrations, offering perspective without trying to fix everything. It was coming home to her empty penthouse and feeling the absence of his presence, the way silence had shifted from peaceful to lonely. It was Emma asking if Clara would come to her soccer game, then beaming when Clara showed up in jeans and a team t-shirt that Daniel had bought for her. It was sitting on cold metal bleachers beside Daniel, cheering for a child who was slowly becoming theirs instead of just his. 2 months after the accident, Clara finally took Daniel to the place he'd promised to show her. They left Emma with Diane on a Saturday morning and drove to a small community garden in Queens, a pocket of green hidden between aging apartment buildings. Daniel had a plot there, a rectangle of earth where tomatoes and herbs grew in careful rows, where he came on Sunday mornings when he needed to think. "Sarah and I started this together," he explained, kneeling to check the basil. "After Emma was born, we wanted to teach her where food came from, wanted to give her something to nurture. We'd come here on weekends, all three of us, and work in the dirt like it was the most important thing in the world." Clara knelt beside him, her hands finding the earth, feeling the cool dampness of soil that had been tended with love. "Do you still think about her? When you're here?" "Every time. This place is full of her. Her laugh, her terrible jokes about being a plant mom, the way she'd get dirt on her face and not notice for hours." Daniel's voice was soft but steady. "But it's not sad anymore. It's just memory. It's proof that she existed, that we built something together, that love leaves marks even after people are gone." "I never built anything like this with anyone," Clara admitted. "I built companies and strategies and walls, but never anything that grew, never anything that required patience and care and trust that it would become what it was supposed to be." Daniel's hand found hers, dirt transferring between their palms. "You're building it now. With me. With Emma. It's just happening slower than corporate acquisitions, and you can't control the outcome with spreadsheets and strategic planning. I'm not very good at not controlling outcomes." "I know, but you're getting better." He pulled her to her feet, brushing dirt from her jeans. "Come on, there's something else I want to show you." He led her to a different section of the garden where a plot stood empty except for a small sign that read, "Available for new gardeners." Daniel stopped in front of it, his expression carefully neutral. "I thought maybe you'd want your own space. Not to share mine, but to build your own. Something that's yours, something you create that has nothing to do with business or achievement or proving anything to anyone." He pulled a packet of seeds from his pocket. Sunflowers. They're easy to grow, hard to kill, and they turn toward the light. Seemed appropriate. Clara took the packet, feeling the weight of seeds that held potential, that required nothing but time and care and faith, that something beautiful could grow from small beginnings. Her throat tightened with emotion she'd spent years suppressing. "I don't know how to garden." "I'll teach you." That's what this is. Me teaching you to build something that grows, you teaching me that it's okay to love again. We learn from each other. Daniel's hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "If you want to. No pressure. It's just seeds and dirt and possibility." Clara kissed him instead of answering, and it was nothing like the polished romance of movies or the strategic partnerships she'd witnessed in her corporate world. It was messy and real and tasted like coffee and promise. It was choosing vulnerability over control, Connection over safety, the terrifying possibility of building something that could be destroyed over the loneliness of building nothing at all. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel was smiling and Clara was crying, and neither of those things felt wrong. "I want to," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "I want to learn. I want to build something with you that grows." They spent the morning preparing her plot, turning soil and mapping out where sunflowers would go, where tomatoes might follow, where herbs could fill the spaces between. Daniel explained drainage and sunlight and the importance of patience, and Clara listened like he was teaching her a new language, which, in a way, he was. The language of nurturing instead of conquering, of tending instead of controlling, of trusting process over forcing outcomes. By the time they left, Clara's hands were dirty, and her back ached, and she felt more accomplished than she had closing any business deal. She'd planted seeds. She'd built something with her hands. She'd taken the first step in creating something that had nothing to do with her title or her bank account or her carefully curated professional reputation. The following Monday, Clara called a special board meeting. The executives gathered in the conference room with varying degrees of curiosity and concern, probably expecting another acquisition announcement or strategic pivot. Instead, Clara presented a plan that had been forming since the night in the hospital, since Daniel had told her she deserved to be remembered as more than a title. "I'm stepping back," she announced, watching shock ripple through the room. "Not stepping down, but stepping back. I'm hiring a COO to handle day-to-day operations. I'll remain CEO and focus on long-term strategy, major decisions, and the vision that guides this company. But I will no longer be involved in every decision, every meeting, every crisis that crosses someone's desk." The questions came rapid fire, concerns about leadership vacuum and market perception, and whether this meant she was leaving entirely. Clara fielded each one with the calm authority she'd honed over a decade of leading, but with a new element underneath, the certainty that this decision was right, even if it made other people uncomfortable. "I built this company," she said when the questions finally slowed. "I poured everything I had into making it successful. But success that costs you your humanity isn't success at all. It's just expensive loneliness. I'm choosing a different path forward, one where I can be an effective leader without sacrificing everything that makes me human." After the meeting, her CFO cornered her in the hallway. "This is about your assistant, isn't it? The one you promoted?" "His name is Daniel, and yes, partially. But it's more than that. It's about realizing that I have one life, and I've spent too much of it in this building working toward milestones that never brought me any real satisfaction." Clara met his eyes steadily. "When I'm dying, I won't wish I'd closed more deals or worked longer hours. I'll wish I'd spent more time with people I love. I'm making that choice now, while I still can." The COO hire took 3 weeks. Clara chose a brilliant woman from a competitor, someone hungry and sharp, and completely capable of handling the operational demands Clara had been carrying alone. On her first day, Clara walked her through the company infrastructure, introduced her to key players, and felt something like relief settling over her shoulders. This was what delegation actually looked like. Not abandoning responsibility, but trusting other talented people to carry their share of the weight. With her new schedule and her new COO, Clara found she had time for things she'd abandoned years ago. She bought a camera, not the professional equipment she'd sold, but a simple digital model that fit in her bag. She started photographing the city again, capturing architecture and light, and the small moments of beauty that existed in urban landscapes. She joined Miranda for lunch without checking her phone every 5 minutes. She went to Emma's soccer games and PTA meetings, and discovered that being present for a child's life was more fulfilling than most business achievements. And slowly, carefully, she let herself fall completely in love with Daniel Harper. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was quiet moments accumulated over weeks and months. Daniel bringing her coffee in the morning made exactly how she liked it, not because he was her assistant, but because he knew her. Emma falling asleep during movie nights with her head on Clara's lap, trusting her completely. Diane including Clara in family dinners and holiday plans without asking if she'd be there, just assuming she would be because she was family now. It was Daniel's hand finding hers in the dark, his voice saying, "I love you," for the first time on an ordinary Tuesday while they were making dinner, the words slipping out naturally like they'd been waiting for permission to exist. It was Clara saying it back and meaning it, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. It was terrifying and wonderful, and nothing like the controlled, strategic life she'd built before the accident. 3 months after the crash, Clara sold her penthouse. The pristine apartment, with its museum-quality emptiness, had never felt like home. And she couldn't pretend anymore that expensive views made up for isolation. She bought a townhouse in Brooklyn, close enough to Daniel's apartment that Emma could walk between them, big enough that they could all exist in the same space without feeling crowded. She didn't ask Daniel if he wanted to move in together. Instead, she simply started spending more nights at his place and having him stay at hers, until the lines blurred and Emma started asking why they had two homes when they were always together anyway. "She has a point," Daniel said one Sunday morning, watching Clara make pancakes in his kitchen while Emma set the table. "We're basically living together without the convenience of actually living together." "Are you asking me something?" Clara flipped a pancake, trying to appear casual even though her heart was racing. "I'm saying that Emma wants a bigger bedroom, and your townhouse has 3 bedrooms, and we already spend most of our time together anyway. I'm saying maybe it makes sense to stop maintaining 2 separate lives and just commit to building one together." Clara set down the spatula, turning to face him fully. "You want to move into my townhouse, you and Emma. I want us to have a home together, officially. No more splitting time between places, no more keeping separate spaces just because it feels safer." Daniel's eyes were steady on hers. "But only if you're ready. Only if you want this as much as I do." Emma, who'd been suspiciously quiet during this exchange, suddenly appeared at Clara's elbow. "I think we should do it. Your house has a backyard, and Dad said maybe we could get a dog if we had a backyard. Plus, your kitchen is bigger, and that means Dad can make more cookies at once." Clara laughed, pulling Emma into a hug that still felt new, but was starting to feel natural. "Those are very practical reasons." "I'm a practical person. I get it from you." Emma looked up at her with those serious dark eyes. "But also, I like it when we're all together. It feels right. Like we're supposed to be a family." The word family lodged in Clara's throat, beautiful and terrifying. She'd never had that. Not really. She'd had her parents and Miranda, but that felt different from this. This was choosing to build something with people who'd chosen her back, creating family instead of just inheriting it. "I like it when we're all together too," Clara said quietly. "And yes, we should probably get that dog Emma's been researching obsessively." Emma's shriek of joy was loud enough that Daniel's neighbors probably heard it. She launched into an immediate detailed presentation about the virtues of rescue dogs versus puppies, completely unaware that she'd just witnessed her father and Clara committing to building a life together. They moved in over the course of 2 weeks, Daniel's small apartment slowly emptying into Clara's townhouse, until both spaces were combined into something new. Emma claimed the bedroom with the window seat, immediately filling it with books and stuffed animals and her ever-growing collection of nature documentaries. Daniel's kitchen equipment merged with Clara's rarely used appliances. Photos of Sarah found places on walls beside Clara's new photography, past and present existing together without conflict. The first night they spent in the townhouse as a complete household, Clara lay awake listening to the sounds of other people existing in her space. Daniel breathing beside her, Emma's sleep sounds from down the hall, the creak of an old building settling. Everything she'd once thought she needed to control, all the solitude she'd convinced herself was strength, felt impossibly distant from this moment of chaotic domestic peace. "You're thinking too loud," Daniel murmured, his arm tightening around her waist. "I can hear your brain spinning." "I'm just processing. This is my first time living with people since college." "How's it feel?" Clara considered the question seriously. "Terrifying, wonderful. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be and also completely out of my depth." "That sounds about right." Daniel pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "For what it's worth, I'm terrified too. This is my first relationship since Sarah, my first time bringing someone into Emma's life as more than a friend. We're both figuring this out as we go." "Small steps?" "The smallest, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one family dinner at a time." Clara turned in his arms, finding his face in the darkness. "I love you. I should say that more often. I love you and I love Emma, and I love this life we're building, even though it scares me." "I love you too." "And Clara?" His hand found her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You're doing better at this than you think. Emma adores you. You show up for her in ways that matter. You're learning to be present, to be vulnerable, to let people in. That's not nothing. It's everything, Clara whispered. It's literally everything I spent years convinced I didn't need. They fell asleep tangled together, and Clara dreamed of gardens and sunflowers turning toward light, of Emma's gap-toothed smile, of Daniel's hands covered in dirt and possibility. She dreamed of a life that wasn't measured in achievements or quarterly reports, but in moments of connection, in small gestures of love, in the accumulation of ordinary days that added up to extraordinary meaning. The months continued their steady march forward, each one bringing new adjustments and small revelations. Clara learned that Emma had nightmares sometimes about losing people, legacy trauma from Sarah's death that required patience and reassurance. She learned that Daniel needed space occasionally to process his grief, that loving him meant understanding Sarah would always be part of their story. She learned that family wasn't about perfection or having all the answers. It was about showing up consistently, about choosing each other even when it was hard, about building trust through accumulated presence. Her company thrived under the new structure, the COO handling operations with the kind of focused intensity Clara recognized because she'd once embodied it herself. Clara found she could be effective in fewer hours, that strategic thinking actually improved when she wasn't drowning in operational minutiae. She made better decisions, built stronger relationships with her executive team, and discovered that delegation wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. On a Saturday morning, 6 months after the accident, Clara woke to find Emma standing beside the bed with a handmade card and a very serious expression. "I made you something," Emma announced, climbing onto the bed without waiting for permission. "It's for Mother's Day tomorrow. I know you're not technically my mom, but Dad said I could call you that if I wanted to, and I wanted to, so I made you this." Clara's hand shook slightly as she took the card. Inside, Emma had drawn a picture of the three of them in their garden, which now existed in their actual backyard, sunflowers growing tall beside tomato plants. Above the drawing, in Emma's careful handwriting, "To Clara, who taught me that families come in all shapes. Love, Emma. P.S. You're a really good mom, even though you're still learning." Clara couldn't speak past the tightness in her throat. Daniel appeared in the doorway, coffee mugs in hand, his expression soft as he watched Emma curl into Clara's side. "I told her she didn't have to," Daniel said quietly. "I told her she could just make you a regular card, that there was no pressure to use that word if she wasn't ready." "But I am ready," Emma insisted. "Clara does mom things. She comes to my games and helps with homework and makes sure I eat vegetables even though I complain. She's my mom. She's just also Clara, which is good because I like her as Clara." Clara set the card on the nightstand carefully, like it was made of glass instead of construction paper and crayon. Then she pulled Emma into a tight hug, letting tears fall into the child's hair. "Thank you," she managed. "This is the best gift anyone's ever given me. Better than business stuff? So much better than business stuff." They spent Mother's Day at the community garden, all three of them working in the dirt while Diane took photos and offered gardening advice. Emma planted marigolds around Clara's sunflowers, explaining that they kept bugs away and made everything prettier. Daniel harvested tomatoes and talked about making sauce for dinner. And Clara, covered in dirt with her expensive manicure destroyed and her designer jeans stained, felt more successful than she ever had closing million-dollar deals. This was success. This was what mattered. Not the empire she'd built alone, but the family she was building together. Not the title on her business cards, but the trust in Emma's eyes when she called her mom. Not the perfectly controlled life she'd constructed, but the messy, chaotic, beautiful reality of loving people who loved her back. That evening, after Emma was asleep and Diane had gone home, Clara and Daniel sat on their back porch watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. Daniel's hand was laced with hers, his thumb tracing lazy circles against her palm. "I've been thinking about something," Daniel said quietly. "Should I be worried?" "Depends on how you feel about permanent commitments." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Clara's heart stopped. "I know it's only been 6 months since the accident. I know we're still figuring things out, still learning how to be a family. But Clara, I don't need more time to know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and understated and perfect. I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm asking you to keep being exactly who you've become. Someone who chooses love over control, who shows up for the people who matter, who's brave enough to be vulnerable. Will you marry me?" Clara looked at the ring, at Daniel's face illuminated by porch light and hope, at the house behind them where Emma slept and their combined lives existed in harmonious chaos. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, alone in a sterile penthouse, married to her work, convinced that walls were protection instead of prison. That woman wouldn't have recognized this moment, wouldn't have understood why tears were streaming down her face as she nodded. "Yes," Clara said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll keep choosing you and Emma and this life we're building together." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and it felt like a promise and a choice and a beginning all at once. They sat together in the summer darkness, fireflies blinking like stars brought to earth, and Clara understood something fundamental. The accident hadn't changed her life. She'd changed it herself, one small step at a time, one vulnerable choice after another, until she'd become someone who could accept love without armor, who could build family from chosen connection, who could measure success in moments instead of milestones. The rain had started it all, rain that turned streets dangerous and sent a car spinning into impact. But what came after the rain was growth, the kind that required patience and tending and faith that something beautiful could emerge from destruction. Clara Whitmore, who'd once built an empire alone, had learned to build a life with people who stayed. And in the staying, in the choosing, in the daily commitment to show up even when it was hard, she'd found something worth more than any achievement. She'd found home. 3 months later, they married in the community garden surrounded by sunflowers Clara had planted herself. Emma, as flower girl in a purple dress she'd chosen specifically because it was the color of creativity and magic. The guest list was small. Miranda and her family, Diane, Yanan, and a few close friends, key people from Clara's company who'd watched her transformation with varying degrees of amazement. No elaborate production, no designer gown, just Clara in a simple white dress, and Daniel in a dark suit, promising forever while standing in dirt they'd tended together. Emma held the rings, taking her responsibility very seriously. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Emma raised her hand and announced, "I object to them not being married yet. Can we hurry this up?" The laughter was warm and genuine, and Clara understood that this imperfect, joyful, real moment was what she'd been missing her entire life. When they kissed, when Emma hugged them both with fierce 8-year-old enthusiasm, when Diane cried and Miranda made a toast about Clara finally learning to be human, Clara felt the final wall fall away. She was no longer the woman who'd lain in a wrecked car testing who would stay. She was someone who'd learned that staying was reciprocal, that love was action, that family was built through consistent presence. The reception lasted into evening, fairy lights strung between garden plots. Emma dancing with anyone who'd partner with her, Daniel's hand always finding Clara's in the crowd. At one point, Clara stood at the edge of the celebration, watching her new family and her old life merge into something she'd never imagined wanting chanting. Miranda found her there, pressing a glass of champagne into her hand. "You look happy. Actually genuinely happy, not just professionally satisfied." "I am happy, terrifyingly happy." "Good. You deserve it." Miranda clinked her glass against Clara's. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Not for building the company or being successful, but for having the courage to dismantle everything you thought you needed and build something real instead. It was the scariest thing I've ever done. The best things usually are." Daniel appeared, claiming Clara for a dance despite the lack of actual dance floor. They swayed together in the grass, Emma joining them to make it a group hug that moved vaguely in time with the music. And Clara thought about the stranger who'd stayed with Sarah, the anonymous person whose kindness had shaped Daniel's entire philosophy of showing up for people who needed it. "I wish I could thank them," Clara said quietly. Whoever stayed with Sarah, their choice to be present for a stranger created this entire chain of events that led to us. "Maybe that's the point," Daniel replied. "Maybe we honor them by staying for other people, by being the person who shows up, who cares, who chooses connection over convenience." Clara understood then what she wanted to be remembered for. Not as Clara Whitmore, CEO, who built an empire. Not as a title or an achievement or a name in industry publications, but as someone who'd learned that staying mattered, that presence was power, that choosing to be vulnerable was the bravest thing anyone could do, as someone worth stopping for. The garden party wound down eventually, guests departing with hugs and well wishes, Emma falling asleep in Daniel's arms with her flower crown askew. They drove home together, actually home, to the townhouse they shared, to the life they'd built, and put Emma to bed before collapsing onto their couch in their wedding clothes. "We did it," Daniel said, pulling Clara against his chest. "We're married. You're stuck with me now." "I'm choosing to be stuck with you. There's a difference." Clara tilted her head to look at him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying, for not letting me pretend, for teaching me that small steps can lead to extraordinary places." Her hand found his, their wedding bands catching lamplight. "For loving me enough to demand that I become more than just my achievements." "You were always more than your achievements. You just needed someone to help you see it." They sat in comfortable silence, the house settling around them, their life together spreading out in every direction with possibility and promise. Clara thought about the woman she'd been in that wrecked car, about her decision to close her eyes and test who would stay. She'd been looking for proof that she mattered beyond her title, beyond her power, beyond her carefully constructed persona. She'd found it in the most unexpected place, in a man who'd stayed because someone had once stayed for him, who taught her that love was action and presence and the daily choice to show up even when it was hard. In a child who'd lost her mother but found room in her heart for someone new. In a family built from choice and connection and the courage to be vulnerable. The rain had washed away the old Clara, the one who measured worth in achievements and built walls instead of bridges. What grew in the aftermath was someone softer and stronger, someone who understood that empires built alone crumbled eventually, but love, messy, imperfect, chosen love, could weather any storm. Clara fell asleep on the couch with Daniel's heartbeat steady beneath her ear and their future unfurling like sunflowers turning toward light. She dreamed of gardens and growth, of Emma growing up with two parents who loved her, of growing old with Daniel and never taking a single day for granted. She dreamed of staying and being stayed for, and understanding finally that this was what it meant to be truly, completely alive. When morning came, Clara woke to find Emma had crawled between them sometime in the night, small and warm and completely trusting. Daniel's arm was thrown over both of them, protective even in sleep. And Clara, looking at her family in the early light, understood that she'd found what she'd been searching for in that wrecked car. She'd found people who stayed. She'd found home. She had found herself. And in the finding, in the choosing, in the daily commitment to love and be loved, Clara Whitmore had built something far more valuable than any empire. She'd built a life worth living, surrounded by people who saw her not as a title, but as someone worth every moment of staying. The story that began in rain and wreckage ended in sunshine and promise. In a townhouse in Brooklyn where sunflowers grew in the backyard and a family chose each other every single day. It ended with Clara finally understanding that the greatest achievement wasn't building something alone. It was having the courage to let people in, to build together, to trust that being vulnerable was strength instead of weakness. It ended with Clara Whitmore, finally, completely, beautifully human.